Chapter 833. The sword light rose up and silently fled into the distance. That initial celestial realm blade-wielding cultivator didn't sense anything. The blade's shadow flashed, bringing with it millions of yellow light as it struck down. With this person leading the way, the many cultivators in front, as well as the numerous intents that spread over, were all tempted to attack. There were already several streaks of light that charged over. Dozens of spaceships were all on high alert, their weapons facing one another. At this moment, the 1210 Extreme Imperial Dao Dragon Tooth swords finally arrived. The blade-wielding cultivator was first shocked as he looked at the bone swords that were flying over. Originally, he was shocked at how these swords were so close to him without a sound. However, when he looked at the swords, they were extremely ugly. Even the spiritual energy reaction was weak. He scoffed coldly. "This is a sword formation? This is the first time I have seen such a weird thing. Is this a specialty of your cloud world?" His face was filled with disdain, but his reaction was really careful. The blade light retracted slightly, and then he didn't defend and counterattacked. He slashed out, bringing with it the strength of mountains as he slashed through the air. With a wave of his hand, the entire space was split into two. Vaguely, the 12 sword shadows were separated. Using such a method, no matter what kind of sword formation it was suitable and had been tested time and time again. As expected, the moment he slashed out, the connection between the 12 swords was forcefully broken. The cycle of the sword path also paused for a moment. The entire sword formation was forcefully blocked by his blade energy and was a breath away from the celestial realm. They couldn't get close and were in a total mess. I heard that 10,000 years ago, the Cloud World Martial Path was extremely prosperous. There were 6 Saint Venerables who came from the Cloud World. Today it seems like they don't live up to their name. No, I should say that they're making a joke out of themselves. However, in the next moment, before his words landed, the 12 white swords flashed once more. They actually teleported, and in a blink of an eye, they appeared beside him. When the sword energy exploded out, the blade-wielding cultivator felt the space around him suddenly twist abnormally. The lower half of his body was speeding up while the upper half was slowing down. The left half of his body was as heavy as 1,000 mountains. The right half was totally weightless, as light as a feather. There were also 2 different but extremely strong repulsive forces that descended upon him. At this moment, he felt as if there were more than 10 experts attacking him at the same time. Before he could figure out what was going on, he was sliced into pieces by the aura of the sword formation. The Yuan soul was unable to escape in time and was instantly torn apart. Zhongsho chuckled as he watched from afar. Then, he sighed and thought to himself, why bother? He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to find a suitable chicken to kill, as an example. However, this person had jumped out impatiently. He was a little shocked by the strength of the sword formation. The 10 Extreme Imperial Dao Destruction sword formation was indeed similar to his 3,000 star falling technique. It also controlled various Daos, but the 10 Extreme Imperial Dao Destruction sword formation was supported by a sword artifact. As for his 3,000 starfall art, it used the stars in the void of his heart as a weapon. One was internal, while the other was external. In terms of the level of conception, his 3,000 star descent was naturally stronger. However, this 10 Extreme Imperial Dao Destruction sword formation was much easier to form. If one didn't ask for the heart and weapon to be totally merged, then one could ask a good friend to help craft a sword artifact. It was much easier. However, the 2 techniques in his hands could complement each other and perfect each other. At this moment, although he was only using the power of the sword formation, he also borrowed a portion of the 3,000 star falling power. When the sword formation was spread out, each sword could use a Dao technique. There was no need for spells, it could be instantly cast. This celestial realm cultivator was naturally slain with 1 sword. When this person died, the entire void was silent. The restless aura in the void was like ice water was poured over it, instantly becoming silent. The few figures that were flying over also stopped halfway, their expressions cautious. However, in just half a breath, someone hollered in rage. What a bunch of cowardly cowards. A Cloud World native with some skill, just a sword formation with instant space ability. Were they so scared that they ran out? Zhongsho's eyes squinted as he glanced over, only to see one person still charge over. The blood-red light soared into the sky, and within it, there seemed to be a figure holding a long staff. It turned into 100,000 feet large and smashed down toward the ship. The three Spirit Realm cultivators on the other side only tried to defend slightly before they all let out muffled groans and seemed to have been injured. Even with the spiritual formation on the ship supporting, the three of them working together couldn't block it. Initial Celestial Realm, Demon Path Cultivator. This person's combat strength was close to double that of the blade-wielding Martial Cultivator. The spiritual sense he spread out could also sense that the aura around him, which he had suppressed, started to become restless because of this person. Zhongsho instantly laughed coldly, killing intent boiling in his eyes. It seemed like apart from using war to stop war, there was no other way. He had to use lightning speed to cut through the mess. This place was filled with dangers, and it wasn't a good place to train people. Who knew what the situation was like within the Yuanran world, and what kind of hardships would they have to go through? Before that, it was best to maintain everyone's combat strength. With his killing intent set, Zhongsho rose into the air, leaving the ship and standing in the sky above the fleet. With a thought, the 12 white longswords flashed a few times, as quick as a shadow as they slashed toward the ball of bloodlight. The stick-wielding figure in the blood laughed coldly when he saw the situation. I'm not that Urju. This sword formation isn't something that can be used on the stage. Can it do anything to me? The rod smacked out, and the space within 1,000,000 feet was sealed. The aura was heavy and majestic, along with the sound of metal and stone clashing. It actually caused the 12 sword lights to scatter in all directions. It also stirred and caused the sword shadows to scatter even further. However, when this person's rod attack stopped, the 12 white sword lights turned back and struck down. How annoying. The blood-colored person didn't care at all. Another rod smashed the void. However, this strike was no longer able to disperse the sword formation. The 12 flying swords seemed to have a life of their own, extremely nimble, but they didn't lose their sharpness. They all followed a mysterious and indescribable trajectory. They all slashed down, clashing head-on and slashing into the gaps of the rod energy. Then, like a butcher dissecting a cow, it didn't use any strength at all as it smashed the giant rod into pieces inch by inch. Attacking from the weak points, it was really neat and clean. It was also really sharp. The person in the blood flames was first stunned. When he reacted, the 12 sword shadows had already slashed in front of him. The blood-colored energy that he was so proud of couldn't block these flying swords for even a moment. It was instantly forced aside. The person within didn't even have time to have a complete thought. Why did he feel that this sword formation was like 12 celestial realm cultivators who grasped different Daos attacking him at the same time? Although this power was much weaker, it was still a lot weaker. It was definitely at the celestial realm. How could he block it? The sword light smashed across, and another patch of blood rained scattered in the void. Blood Soul Lord. A few exclamations spread out from the distance. It was the name of the demon cultivator who had fallen in the blood light. As for the few cultivators who wanted to attack together with him, they were startled once more and stopped in their tracks. They were hesitating whether to continue or retreat. They all exchanged glances with one another, shock flashing in their eyes. At this moment, Blood Soul Lord and Urju, who were killed consecutively, no matter which one it was, they were all top people in the same grade, heroes. However, they were all slain by the sword formation with one sword. If the two of them were already like that, then what about them who were only at the spirit realm? More eyes gathered on the teen in the sky above the fleet. With a late spirit realm body, he stood proudly in the void alone. He was like a giant pillar that supported the heavens, facing the numerous cultivators all around. Zhongsho didn't have the patience to wait for them to make their choice. Since he wanted to show off his strength, he couldn't hesitate at all. He couldn't even show any weakness or pity. He needed to be extremely strong to be able to shock these people. The cloud world had been silent for too long. Even if there were cultivators who left the cloud world, those truly outstanding people who relied on their own strength to reach the spirit realm wouldn't develop in the cloud world, which had fewer resources and a lower level. Those who remained in the cloud world were all grade 7 and grade 9 people who had the ability to travel in the void, but couldn't improve further. They tried their best to leave the cloud world and choose another place. They even directly headed to the Tianfeng world to advance. As time went on, people started to look down on them. Those 1210 extreme, imperial, Dao dragon tooth swords turned around and turned into dozens of streaks of light. In just a breath, a ball of blood mist floated about. It caused the dozens of cultivators in the distance to be slightly startled. They were stunned as they looked on as one of them was sliced into pieces by the sword light. Actually, this person was just slightly closer to him. Apart from spiritual sense suppression, he didn't even attack this cloud world fleet. They were filled with shock and rage. Shortly after, another person was sliced into pieces by the sword light. These two people were just the beginning. Closely after, several spirit realm cultivators were sliced down. It was pretty much a one-sided massacre. The sword formation was so sharp that no one was able to block it for even a moment. The remaining people didn't have any intention to go against this fleet. The spaceships around also avoided them and scattered in panic. Zhong Shou was expressionless as he looked forward coldly. Those who are isolated and arrogant will be killed. Those who are threatening will be killed. Those who are 3 breaths away will be killed. When you all die, don't say that I didn't warn you. It was completely silent in the void. Pretty much everyone consciously left 3 breaths away from the celestial realm. Just a few breaths later, a golden-robed person suddenly appeared. His majestic voice shook the void. What an arrogant person will be killed. Those who are threatening will be killed. I have roamed the world for thousands of years and have never seen such an arrogant junior like you. Before he finished, a silver light shot out from Zhong Shou's sleeves. It traveled swiftly through the void. In the eyes of everyone, it was actually a chain of thousands of shadows. When all the silver shadows disappeared, that flying knife was already pinned to the center of this person's brows. Chapter 834. What a good show of strength, Slay. Slay those who threaten. I have roamed the world for thousands of years and have never seen such an arrogant junior like you. Before his words landed, a silver light shot out from Zhong Shou's sleeves. It traveled swiftly in the void, in the eyes of everyone. It was actually a chain of thousands of shadows. When all the silver shadows disappeared, that flying knife had already stabbed into the brow of the person who spoke. The moment he appeared and said a few words, his life force was wiped out and there was no more sound. Zhong Shou's brow rose up slightly, following which he touched his nose in embarrassment. I nearly forgot that there was something I didn't say. In front of me, those who speak rudely will also be slain. He was too lazy to speak nonsense with this person, which is why he killed him with one sword. The moment he said these words, no one dared to reply. In the surrounding void, everyone present kept silent. Everyone here recognized the person from before. He was a famous person, the ruler of a world. His name was Jiujing. Although he was a factionless cultivator, he had recently joined a large power. Not only was his cultivation really amazing, intermediate celestial realm, he also had many experts under him. But who would have thought that today he would die under this person's blade just because he spoke out of turn and stood up for those who had fallen? Those spaceships didn't dare to get close, afraid that they would be careless. They smashed into the area that Zhong Shou said he would definitely slay. Who knew if the so-called 3 breaths was spirit realm, celestial realm, or God realm? Those who speak rudely will also be slain. Although those words were said calmly, along with the death of Jiujing, it was really shocking. They were also shocked. Looking at this teen, his aura was really hidden. They could only sense that his strength was at late spirit realm. However, why was he so strong? So strong that Jiujing had no way to fight back. Also, what kind of ability was that flying knife? At this moment, apart from the 300,000 Qian elites, their eyes were filled with respect. Even the disciples and Kenzo sect swordsmen who did not know Zhongsho's real identity as Tsang Xingdao were filled with respect and admiration. Even the eyes of those Buddhist disciples with calm mental states flashed with a strange light. Today, I finally know that the invincible name of the cloud world is true. It is indeed the blood sword devil lord's doing. To think that an immortal realm cultivator would be killed with a single saber strike just because of a disagreement. That's the legendary 6 gods of flying knife technique. How sharp, rebuking an area, moving unhindered and invincible. I don't seek immortality. I just want to have a little of the monster lord's might in the future. Zifang, who was on another spaceship, looked into the sky with a serious expression. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. They all said that the cloud world is about to rise. The spiritual wave had yet to rise, and there were already such people. It was hard for them not to prosper. The few Buddhist venerables planned things in the cloud world a long time ago. Did they expect this? After saying that, he smiled at silent sound behind him. Are you not used to it? Such killing matters are close to barbaric. I'm afraid it doesn't suit your personality. Silent Sound shook her head and thought about it. I heard that when the great Lotus stepped into the secret world, he was obstructed everywhere. He used the 12 purple gold Lotus platforms, the 3 Splendor Dharma sword, to kill 100,000 demons and demons, destroying mountains and temples. After hundreds of battles, he finally calmed down the secret world and made it our Buddhist faction paradise. Master also taught us that the Buddhist faction wants people to be kind and merciful. However, there are also protector arhats and vajras. To spread the Buddhist path, one has to do things like Ajura. Although she said that, Silent Sound's face turned ashen white. Zifang's eyes flashed, and then he smiled. There's no need to force yourself. However, you must remember that even our Buddhist faction has the humiliation of being chased out of the fan world. While the two of them spoke, there were changes in the void. Several people stepped out of the void one after another. Their cultivations were high, no weaker than that of Jiujing. Their faces were really ugly. One of them bowed towards Zhongsho. Tianfang Guild Tanjing greets cultivator friend. My ancestors came from the cloud world. Speaking of which, we are from the same place. Be it his tone or actions, they were all really respectful. Tanjing raised his head and looked over with a questioning gaze. What is your name, friend? For you to be able to kill Jiujing with one knife, you must be famous in the cloud world. Or maybe I, Tanjing, have heard of you before. Zhongsho swept a few of them and knew that they were the ones who could make the decisions here. Before this, they hid behind the scenes and allowed their subordinates to chase them out. Only when things got out of hand did they personally appear. However, since they welcomed them with smiles, it wasn't good for him to immediately kill them. The Qian still had a long time outside of the cloud world. Since he had already shown his might, it wasn't good for him to make enemies everywhere. Speaking of which, he had some grievances with Tianfang Guild. However, that elder Kunran died in the hands of Fangjue, who wanted the items of the first Dragon Hall. Someone saw him snatching the Universe Light Hall, so Tsungyan Hall killed him to silence him. It had nothing to do with Zhongsho at all. Even if someone asked, he definitely wouldn't admit it. I am Zhongsho. Just 4 words. He didn't mention his background or his name. It wasn't because he was arrogant, but because if he did, people would look down on him and not treat him as a person. As expected, the people opposite him were at a loss. It was obvious that they didn't know his name. Zhongsho didn't care. It was best if they heard about it, but it was okay if they didn't. Did he have to explain it to them in detail? How many people had he killed in the Taoist faction, and how many things had he done? He laughed, and Zhongsho opened his mouth to ask. In that case, what is the purpose of all of you obstructing me here? Could it be that you also want to challenge me to a duel? The 5 of them frowned. They heard the provocation in his words. It was precisely because of this that everyone present was surprised and bewildered, and it was difficult for them to determine the truth. To be so confident and fearless, he definitely had some confidence. Moreover, the 5 of them had no confidence in being able to block that silver knife. Then, at this moment, it was best to delay and bear with it. One of them broke out into a laugh. Cultivator, you must be joking. The Yuanren world still has no owner. Since we are here, naturally, you are here too. We do want to stop you and have one less opponent, but unfortunately, we don't have the strength. He said it calmly, but his expression also turned solemn. However, although we fight, we have to be restrained. This Yuanren world battle can be left to the juniors. We celestial cultivators just need to look on from the side and don't need to interfere. After all, we cultivate for the sake of immortality. There is no need to fight to the death for such things. I wonder if fellow Taoist agrees with what I said. When Zhongsho heard that, his eyes flashed, and he said curiously, I came from the cloud world and am not clear about the outer region matters. Is this the rule of the world? Seeing the people opposite him nod their heads in agreement, Zhongsho asked, Then what is going on with the few of you? Chapter 835, including Tianfang Guild Tanjing. The few of them felt awkward when they heard this and were speechless. The two people who took the lead were undoubtedly above the immortal stage. Zhongsho laughed coldly, his gaze looking right into their hearts. Forget it. There is no need for you to explain. I roughly know about such matters. Be it inside or outside the cloud world, they are all the same. Only when the fist is useless will they reason with you. If it wasn't for Long Ing stepping into End Realm right away, why would the Taoist faction compromise with him? In today's battle, if he didn't use these few celestial realm cultivators to show his strength, they probably wouldn't have appeared. When Tanjing heard this, he nodded his head slightly. I won't hide this from you. Why would an eagle talk about fairness with an ant? Isn't that amusing? Cultivator, today you showed us how strong you are, so naturally, we have to use these rules. The other people didn't say anything. It was obvious that they agreed with Tanjing's words. Zhongsho was in deep thought. A moment later, he nodded his head. These rules are not bad. However, I'm not a celestial realm cultivator. Moreover, in my eyes, you're no different from those people who died just now. Eagles won't reason with ants, but how are you all different from ants? The moment these words were said, the expressions of all the cultivators in the air changed, and they couldn't say a word. A moment later, Tanjing opened his mouth. Although Tanjing isn't your opponent, I think our Tianfang Guild has the right to talk to you. It is best if we don't joke about such things. Moreover, your cultivation is only at the spirit realm. However, no one here dares to look down on you as a spirit realm cultivator. You really have a sharp tongue. Zhongsho scoffed, thinking to himself that he was joking. That might not be the case. He didn't agree or disagree, just asking flatly, where is Jiujing staying? How much land does he control in this Yuanren world? He could tell at a glance that the unlucky celestial cultivator who died under his flying knife was on the same level as them in terms of status and strength. In the Yuanren realm, he would definitely be a hero. This person was the lord of a world, and the original world that he ruled was one that Zhongsho didn't need to think about. Once Jiujing died, there would definitely be someone who would take over his position. Moreover, it would definitely be under the control of some great power. However, in this Yuanren realm, Zhongsho would definitely take the land that this person controlled. The people on the other side all looked at each other. One of them helplessly said, in the southwest region of the Yuanren realm, this person ruled this place and established a celestial dynasty. There were 3 immortal cultivators, 20 spirit cultivators, and about 10,000 cultivators. It had jurisdiction over the 7 countries and 10,000 miles of land. Occupy an immortal residence called the Yuanjing Palace. Tan Xiu also spoke. This Reverend Jiujing has an extraordinary background. He is one of the deacons of the League of the 7 Heretics. It is okay for fellow cultivator to occupy his land. However, in the future, you need to be really careful. The League of the 7 is one of the powers in this region, and they have never lacked 7 Saint Realm experts. Although they aren't here, their strength is really great. These words were both a reminder and a warning. They were trying to show their goodwill and sell him a favor. It was also to tell Zhongsho that he had caused a lot of trouble, and it was best if he didn't find a chance to cause trouble. Zhongsho was deep in thought. The so-called celestial dynasty was also a cultivator power. It was similar to a normal dynasty, but also different. All the official systems and governing laws were more or less the same. However, under the celestial dynasty, there weren't any normal people, only strong cultivators. Within the cloud world, the most famous one was the Lu family. They used the sky-burning celestial dynasty to rule the 800 worlds. In the mortal world, they supported various countries to rule the people. With the mortal countries as a buffer, they could reduce the invasion of the king path power to the greatest extent. However, even then, it wasn't enough. Thus, they split the 800 worlds into dozens of pieces with dozens of country lords. This caused the Lu family to have internal conflicts. Even the God Emperor of the future was like that. After unifying the cloud world, he personally broke it apart and built the celestial dynasty. He split the original land into various countries, causing it to break apart. In the future, if he wanted to go up against the Lu family and also wanted to reach the peak of the martial path, he would have to walk this path. However, at this moment, the so-called king energy hadn't contaminated his foundations. He didn't think about it and didn't care much about it. Now that Tanjing mentioned it, he remembered that it was time for him to consider his next step and how he should proceed. As for the League of the Seven, he had never heard of it. At least there were 7 Saint Realm experts, which sounded decent. However, if there weren't any Saint Venerables, they were all scum in this region. At most, these scum would be slightly bigger. They were too far away, so there was no need for him to care. Thank you for your reminder. Nodding his head, Zhongsho said, As for the rules, I still need to think about it. After saying this, he didn't say any more nonsense. He turned into a beam of light and returned to his ship. As for whether or not he would follow the agreement, he still needed to see whether or not Rulin, Tai Chi, and the others could stand up in the Yuan world. Moreover, if they weren't strong enough, or if they were suppressed by the other sides. If Zhongsho agreed to this agreement, wouldn't he be tying himself up? That was something that a wise person wouldn't do. The 6 ships continued forwards. This time there was nothing stopping them. The cultivators in the air hesitated slightly before they all backed off. Even the few celestial realm cultivators who appeared just now were nowhere to be seen. The moment they came into contact with the spatial barrier, the 6 spaceships exerted their strength and shattered it into pieces. In the next instance, like a bubble merging into a world. The moment they entered, Tai Chi, who had already returned to the flagship, his brows rose up in surprise. This place is not bad. The spiritual energy is actually a little thicker than our cloud world. Zifang nodded his head slightly when he heard that. The spiritual energy density here was indeed a little thicker than the cloud world. He then spread out his spiritual sense. A moment later, he spoke again. This world has a radius of approximately 50,000 miles. There is a city not far away. The people within are no different from us. Although the population isn't as dense as our cloud world, within 200 miles, there are still 400,000 people. The more people there were, the more believers the Buddhist faction would have in the future. The world that Zhongsho chose was indeed not bad. In a medium-sized world, it could be considered one of the best. The division of big and small worlds was really complicated. In the eyes of cultivators, the first was spiritual energy, followed by land. Some worlds were billions of miles wide. However, there were very few living beings, and spiritual energy wasn't abundant. It could only be considered a small-sized world. 10,000 years ago, the cloud world was 1,000,000 miles wide. Spiritual energy was extremely thick and could accept end-realm realms. Without a doubt, it was a large-sized world. Just from the name of the celestial world, one could tell a little. As for Yunlin world, it was just a little short of stepping into the gates of a large world. However, Zifang's words were filled with worry. The better the environment and the more resources there were, the more people would covet it. Naturally, the battles would be more dangerous. Although the 3 factions that followed Zhongsho over included the 3 factions of the cloud world. Any one of them could suppress the so-called League of the Seven. However, now that the cloud world was in chaos, how could they be distracted? Moreover, these opponents might be end realm realms. After all, the outer region's Saint Venerables had been suppressing the Cloud World and the Buddhist faction for a long time. Zhongsho didn't care. After confirming the direction, he headed southwest. Although those few people didn't say the exact location of the Yuanjing Palace, to Zhongsho, it was just a matter of time. Finding this celestial manor wasn't a difficult matter. The 6 ships spread out, and the consciousnesses of more than a dozen spirit realm cultivators swept out in all directions. In just a moment, Zhongsho found something. He left the ship, and with a flash, he was above the clouds. The so-called Yuanjing Palace Celestial Manor was actually floating in the cloud layer. Many extremely tough, but light as dust Hongyun stones built the foundations of the Celestial Manor. 1,000,000 feet from north to south, the scale was really majestic and majestic. There were many places that were empty. 70% of the halls weren't completed. Zhongsho looked at it and took in a deep cold breath. Compared to this palace, the Hanyin Palace that his father left him was like a straw hut in the countryside. The halls were majestic and majestic. The pavilions and pavilions were exquisite and beautiful, giving off the aura of a celestial manor. The first and third dragon halls were stronger than this place, but after all, they were built by the dragon race, and their aesthetic standards were different from humans. For example, Yi Feiyan was conflicted about the fact that he didn't have a horn. Today, I finally know how rich the outer region is. Speaking of which, the land he was in charge of was half of the Yuanren world, but it wasn't as majestic. This Jiujing was just an intermediate celestial realm and was able to defeat him. They're the ones who are too vicious. Tai Chi followed behind and said disapprovingly, "Looking at the people in this world, not only are there few cultivators, but the people have no way to make a living. Many places don't have enough to eat, and there are many starving people. Compared to the Daqian under ruler, it is a huge difference. This world's spiritual energy is really abundant, 50,000 miles of land, and at most 2 billion people. I really don't know how these people ended up in such a state. In the cloud world, even those famous tyrants in history wouldn't cause such a situation to occur in their country." He also suddenly understood why the cloud world went all out against the alien race. Those few Saint Venerables who no one knew about during the Cloud Desolate era didn't hesitate to fight to the death against the alien race after reaching End Realm. It probably wasn't just because of that heaven-opening artifact. "Brother Feng, you praise me too much." If it was normal times, Zhongsho would definitely enjoy Tai Chi's praise. However, at this moment, he didn't bother about it. His heart was dripping blood. Jiujing was already dead, so naturally, the so-called celestial dynasty that this person built wouldn't exist anymore. All his subordinates scattered like birds and beasts. However, he didn't forget that before he left. He swept all the treasures and items within the Yuanjing Palace clean. Forget about that. Zhongsho could barely accept it. However, from what he could sense with his spiritual will, there were a few people not too far off in the distance who were attempting to break the seal and enter what looked like a treasure trove. Chapter 836. Preposterous. If he didn't know or didn't see it. Naturally, Zhongsho wouldn't care. However, at this moment, just by looking at the tight restrictions, he knew that the treasury was really rich. How could he allow others to touch something that was about to fall into his hands? Stealing someone's wealth was a huge hatred. With a thought, the 12 white sword shadows landed from the air. They nailed around the treasury, sword intent surging and sweeping all around. In the end, he wouldn't randomly kill people for these treasures. He just used the 10 Extreme Imperial Dao Dragon 2 sword as a warning. The surrounding cultivators obviously knew about the strength of this sword formation. Their faces turned ashen white. Some of them who knew what was going on immediately fled. As for the greedy ones, they hesitated for a moment before flying away. In the end, outside matters were more important than his life. Zhongsho flew over and took over these people to continue breaking the restrictions. He was lazy to deduce the structure of the restrictions one by one. He just used the 10 extreme Imperial Dao sword formation to forcefully attack and destroy everything. A moment later, Zhong Shou stood within the treasury. The item inside didn't surprise him, but it didn't disappoint him either. It was roughly 1% of the Qin Emperor Subtomb's Mind Stone storage, which was just 20 high Xian grade Mind Stones. It was already not bad for a Celestial Realm cultivator to have such a treasury. However, there were many other miscellaneous items, pretty much filling up the entire 30,000-foot treasury. He didn't feel anything here, but when Tai Chi took a look, he was surprised. Cherry pattern stone, 13,000 cubic meters. They're all high-grade cherry pattern stones. This Yuanren world actually has such items? Oh, this jade is so weird. Is it the legendary heart questioning jade? When Zhong Shou heard this, he laughed to himself. Cherry pattern stone was a type of sword training material, and normal spiritual artifacts and weapons couldn't be used. However, to sword cultivators, it was really crucial and even indispensable. Adding in a small amount of cherry pattern stone powder could greatly increase the connection between the cultivator and the sword. Increasing the agility of the sword and sensing the sword intent would greatly facilitate the initiation of sword cultivation. The cherry stone mines in the cloud world were mostly controlled by the Kenzo sect, but even so, it was far from enough. Only 1,000 cubes were produced every year, which greatly limited the number and combat strength of sword cultivators. As for the heart questioning stone, it had another function, which was to aid in the cultivation of one's mind. Unlike those strange treasures that could cleanse one's soul, this item was not tainted by inner demons, but it was able to attract distracting thoughts in one's heart. Wearing it on one's body would constantly interrogate one's soul. It was as though one was undergoing a demonic tribulation. If one could subdue the conscience stone and not be affected by it, one's soul would naturally become more perfect. They were also rare treasures, and there were as many as 30 of them here. Usually, such a large amount meant that there were large mines in the Yuanren realm. There were still a lot of these two treasures. As expected, when Zifang rushed over and saw the treasures in the room, his expression changed. The two of them looked at each other, and both of them showed some regret. Before this, they definitely didn't expect that their first expedition to the outer region would yield such gains. Just the treasures in the storage room were close to 30% of what they had invested in this time. In the future, there would be large amounts of gains from the various mines. Before they set off, the Daqian Zhong Shou would take half, while Tsang Shengdao, Kenzo sect, and Buddhist faction would split the remaining half. Such a distribution couldn't be changed. Internally, Tsang Shengdao had 3 sects, 6 schools, 8 Buddhist faction, and 7 Kenzo sect. The distribution ratio was different. If he knew that this would happen, he would have fought for more for the vast habitat. Just now, I asked a spirit realm factionless cultivator. I heard that this Yuanren realm was only discovered 100 years ago. This abbot Jiujing has actually accumulated such wealth. As for how he asked and the process of asking, Zifang didn't mention it. I heard that there are many mountains in the southwest. Although the resources are thin, they comprehend the wind. There are 50 spiritual mines and numerous other mines. This was why the place where Jiujing was at was the most desolate. However, the dozens of celestial realm cultivators this time were all envious. Zhong Shou felt more and more that it was a wise choice to choose this person to show off his strength. Then he heard Tai Chi say, "The important thing now is to count the various resources and take over the various mines, in case people think otherwise." The moment he said this, the other people who rushed over all nodded their heads. Just from the chaos in the Yuanjing palace, one could understand a thing or two about him. When a tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Before Jiujing's men left, they definitely wouldn't be clean. They would definitely go all out to scour and sweep up all the treasures. Zhao Yinran frowned. Then, how should we split the items here? The storage room was instantly silent. Everyone exchanged glances with one another, a bright glow flashing in their eyes. When they looked at one another, sparks flew all around. Originally, it was the fairest to split according to value. Then, there was a difference between needing and not needing these spiritual items. For example, that cherry pattern stone. Tai Chi naturally wanted to swallow it all up. However, the Buddhist faction Song Dao also needed such things, especially the latter, who had many different things in the sect and many sword cultivators. Zhongshou also felt that the atmosphere was slowly turning cold. He instantly felt a slight headache, thinking to himself that they hadn't even gained a stable footing and they were already fighting amongst themselves. We have taken down the items and territory, but how should we deal with this League of the Seven? How will we transport these things back to Gantian? Just 2 short sentences caused everyone to come back to their senses. Thinking about how they had just arrived here, they weren't in a rush to split the items. They could just slowly discuss it. Now, it was best to control those minds and transport. This place was 4 months away from Tian, but there were only 6 spaceships. How to transport was also a problem. There were many things here. Not only was there a huge amount, but most of them couldn't be kept in heaven and earth bags and had to be stored with special spells. Strictly speaking, the reason why they were able to occupy this place was because of the strength of Zhongshou's sword. The 3 factions didn't put in much effort. If they were to divide things like this, it would be a little illegitimate. The League of the Seven is okay. Since we had an agreement, we naturally can't stay out of it. Zifang smiled and then asked, as for the 7 countries under Jujing, how is the ruler prepared to deal with them? Zhongshou's brow rose up. This was another matter. Thinking about it for a moment, he opened his mouth. This matter isn't rushed. We know nothing about the geography and geography of the Yuanren world. We are at a loss and don't know where to start. These 7 countries, let's summon them to the court and see what kind of people they have before making a decision. He wasn't prepared to keep the kings that Jujing left, but he needed suitable people to take over. Chapter 837. The 300,000 soldiers took a full 4 days to settle down. Without a doubt, a large portion of them were housed within this Yuanjing palace. To build this celestial manor, Jujing had pretty much gathered all the wealth and resources in the area he ruled. Within this world, there were very few cultivators. Jujing could also gather all the large and small spiritual veins in the heavens and earth here. As a result, the environment within the Yuanjing Palace could be compared to the shrines of the cloud world, and it was a great place to cultivate. Moreover, the number of people it could house far exceeded those few famous shrines. Zhongshou was delighted. This time the people he brought out were the true elites of the Deqian army. Not only had they been through hundreds of battles, but their talents were also not bad. With such an environment and rich resources, in just a few months, there would be a large batch of people who would raise their grade. If it was in the cloud world, for his normal subordinates to have such cultivation conditions, it would probably take 50 years for them to have such a chance. Tai Chi has already sent people to investigate those mine stones. They are rich in resources. I heard that based on the current production, we won't be lacking for 1,500 years. We don't lack mine stones, and we also have a lot of spiritual herbs. Oh, who knows, maybe 10 years later, the 300,000 people here can all reach grade 4. 300,000 true Big Dipper sword soldiers and Big Dipper crossbow soldiers already have 20% of the strength that Great Qin used to sweep the cloud world. At this moment, within Deqian, although there were tens of thousands of Big Dipper sword soldiers, they were only grade 3. They were a greatly reduced version of grade 3. The difference in strength was too huge. However, although there were many surprises, Zhongshou also had a headache. 300,000 people moved into the Yuanren world, and all their food and toiletries were now in his hands. At this moment, he really missed Zhang Huai and Rinbo. With these 2 people, who knew how much of his problems were saved, he wanted to push the responsibility to Shi Rulin, but looking at her thin and weak body, he couldn't bear to do so. Out of these 300,000 people, he didn't find any suitable administrative talents. Why didn't I think about it when I came? Zhongshou sighed. He felt that his hair was about to turn white from worry. If that's the case, I'm afraid we can only use the Celestial Dynasty system. The 300,000 soldiers all had their own commanders, so there was no need for him to worry too much. Within the various countries, there were also different political systems. In that case, he would only need to consider the overall situation, which would save him a lot of trouble. Even when he was not around, Sherulin could do it for him. He remembered that the Chushua lion race had dominated the Cloud Sea for over 10 years. Their strategy was pretty good. This girl was not only an unparalleled general, but also a talented commander. However, compared to Kong Yao, she was slightly inferior. There were pros and cons to this method. The pros were that he didn't have to worry too much about it. The cons were that he couldn't control everything within his sphere of influence. However, these people had just arrived in the Yuanren world, and they only had 300,000 people, so they couldn't do everything in their hands. There was no need to think too much about what to choose. After the first few days of being busy, Zhongsho finally had enough time to study the 3,000 star falling technique and the 10 extreme Imperial Dao destruction sword formation. These two techniques were not only related to his Dao, but also directly related to his current combat strength. That dangerous and indiscernible life and death battle was getting closer and closer to him. Zhongsho had to go all out. During this period of time, the other people didn't slack off either. Zhao Yanran and Tai Chi led people to scout the resources of the Yuanren world. Sherulin and the various generals went around to map out the terrain. On one hand, it was to understand the land under their rule. On the other hand, it was to prepare for war. The dozens of spirit fox hidden guards that Ruashe brought all spread out. The fox race bloodline was best at illusionary techniques. Scouting out the situation was what they were good at. After close to a month, they finally had some clues about the situation in the Yuanren world. Celestial Order, Han Ling Order, Judu Xianting, Shura Race, as well as the League of the Seven, who have already backed out of the fight for this world. Within the room, Zhongsho held the message talisman that Ruashe sent over and was in deep thought. The number of powers that interfered in the fight for the Yuanren world was more than he had expected. Apart from these few, there were many outer region powers. However, they were at a disadvantage. Before the dust settled in the Yuanren world, they were crazily snatching the resources of the land they ruled. These forces were negligible. As Tan Jing had said, Celestial Realm experts wouldn't join in. If they were really fighting for a piece of land, they would call in their friends. Celestial Realm and God Realm experts would throw in endless amounts of strength and engage in intense battles. No matter how strong a power was, they wouldn't be able to take it. The so-called Tianfeng Guild and Xianling Guild wouldn't be able to exist at all. Thus, unless there was a need, the powers would restrain themselves. This was also the tacit understanding between the powers of the outer region. After all, to them, the path of longevity was the foundation. Speaking of which, the 7 countries in the West have some weight. Celestial Realm experts could only sit on the side and watch. Victory and defeat would be decided by those below Spirit Realm. With that, the native strength of the Yuanren world was really important and could be used as support. That Jujing cultivator had indeed raised a tiger and wolf army. The 7-country army had a total of 4 million people. 1 million of them were elites, and they were all decent. Based on what Sherulin said, their combat strength was on the same level as the average Diqian. Out of the few powers, their cloud world was the weakest. Naturally, they had to rely on the native strength of the Yuanren world. As expected, conquering the outer region isn't a simple matter. Speaking of which, it is time for me to come out of seclusion. Zhongsho looked forward. During this month, his speed in the room increased by 10 times. At this moment, the number of stars he could manifest outside had reached 40. His comprehension of the Grand Tao was getting slower and slower. He was still far away from his goal of 72 star Tao seeds to enter the Celestial Realm. As for the 10 extreme Imperial Dao destruction sword formation, after he familiarized himself with the sword training process, his progress was getting faster and faster. At this moment, he had doubled to a full 24. White in color, spiritual light shone as it hung around him. He didn't know how strong it was, but the newly crafted sword looked much better than the previous ones. The dragon aura was vast, and one could see the instant space Long Ing appearing within it. Just at this moment, Zhongsho suddenly sensed something and looked outside of the room, only to see a talisman land in the air and hang outside of the Yuanjing Palace, circling and not leaving. Zhongsho took a look and then casually waved his hand, allowing the talisman to charge in and land in front of him. The talisman spread out, and Tianjing's body instantly appeared in front of him. It was a mirror image. He was tens of thousands of miles away and bowed towards him. A month has passed. Has ruler thought about it? The way he addressed him as monarch was a bit more respectful. It was obvious that during this month, this Tianfeng guild deacon didn't do nothing and had already investigated his identity in the cloud world. Zhongsho looked curiously at the person in front of him who was formed by the spiritual light. 10,000 miles projection? This method was interesting. The timing of this person's attack was also perfect. If it was too early, it would make one feel annoyed. If it was too late and they gained a footing, it wouldn't be appropriate. He expressionlessly looked at Tianjing and said coldly, "I know the rules, but I still need 3 months." 3 months? Tianjing frowned and said, "I'm fine with it. However, that Hanling order and Jidu Xianing might not be willing. Why not make it 1 month? Tianjing can help us. It is hard to offend everyone. Ruler, please think about it. 1.5 months. Zhongsho was really firm, asking for a high price and asking for a low price. That was how it was. 1.5 months from now, I won't interfere in this Yuanren world matter. Tianjing hesitated slightly before nodding his head. Let's follow ruler's intentions and set it at 45 days. At that time, if ruler is still unwilling, there will be no less than 40 celestial realm experts descending. If it really reaches such a situation, the situation will be unsalvageable. Zhongsho scoffed coldly and didn't speak, his eyes filled with mocking intent. Tianjing decisively stopped and said seriously, "Speaking of which, there is something I need to tell ruler. Recently, a few people came to Tianfeng World. I heard that they came from the Liu family. They are investigating about a murder case a few months ago. The time and location are exactly the same as when ruler entered and exited Tianfeng World." Zhongsho's eyes squinted, his expression didn't change, and he was really calm. "Murder case? It is probably me. Then, is Tianfeng Guild prepared to sell me out?" "Ruler, you must be joking," Tianjing said awkwardly. "No matter how much we want to suck up to the Liu family, we won't betray ruler. We can't afford to offend Saint Venerable Long Ing. It is best if we don't get involved. I am just telling you this news to remind ruler." Only then did Zhongsho's expression turn warm. These people knew the pros and cons and knew how to console him. After the matter was settled, Zhongsho smiled. "Is your Tianfeng Guild interested in doing business with me?" The moment he said this, Tianjing's brow rose up, his eyes filled with surprise. What kind of business did Zhongsho have to discuss with them? If it was to form an alliance, then Tianjing had to stay far away. Although Zhongsho's background was strong, apart from Long Ing and Ao Kuan, the strength he could bring out was too little. He talked with Tianjing until the spiritual energy of the 10,000-mile appearance talisman was used up. An hour later, Zhongsho walked out of the room with a smile that wasn't a smile. He was really satisfied with the conversation this time. Hong Jiuqin, Mu Feng, Fuyue, Chao, these few names were the names of the few people that day. In half a day, Tianjing didn't hold back at all, revealing the strength of these few people, the people under them, all the intel. At this moment, out of all the powers in the Yuanren world, the Judu Xianting that Hong Jiuqin was in was the strongest. They occupied the richest southwest land in the Yuanren world. At this moment, they were preparing their troops and horses, eyeing the land that Jiujing was originally under. The other few powers were the same, preparing to split up this southwest land. The situation was indeed really dangerous. Opening up the outer region wasn't a simple matter. Just as he walked out of the room, Zhongsho saw Tai Chi standing in front of the door. When he saw Zhongsho, he was startled and came back to his senses. "Ruler, the royal families of the various countries have arrived. Do you want to meet them?" Chapter 838. King Race of the Various Countries? Let's just leave them hanging for now. Zhongsho had a thought, and knew why this Tai Chi came to find him. His eyes swept behind him and saw that Zhao Yanran was there too. Her brows were filled with seriousness. He smiled. Brother Feng didn't come to find me just for this matter. He didn't know that he had come out of seclusion and still came to disturb him. It was obvious that the matter wasn't small. Although that is the case, it is best if the 7 kings are decided as soon as possible. We need to stabilize the situation and prevent people from panicking. Based on what I know, there are many people within the 7 countries who are having second thoughts. They were only afraid of Jiujing and died at our hands. They can't see through our situation and are just worried. As he said that, Tai Chi said seriously, moreover, if we don't decide, no one will pay the taxes of the 7 countries. Zhongsho looked at Zhao Yanran, only to see that she had a similar expression. Her brow furrowed, her eyes filled with unhappiness. Out of all the people in charge of the 3 factions, her performance was the most unsatisfactory. Maybe because she had never been in charge before, it was still okay on the boat. However, the moment she arrived in the Yuanren world, she was at a loss, causing the Tsang Shengdao disciples to grumble. She had lost all her face. It was understandable that her expression wasn't good. This crazy woman, this time she finally understood the pain of Zhongsho ruling a country, right? This was good. At least she wouldn't mock him all day long. Tai Chi's first sentence made sense. However, the main point was at the end. The 2 of them were unhappy about the chaos below. The situation was chaotic. Not only would it affect their footing in the Yuanren world, but it would also reduce their gains. I already know about this matter. I will deal with it later. Zhongsho nodded slightly. It was indeed time to solve this matter. As for where to start, he more or less had some ideas. That's for the best. We'll just watch how Monarch arranges things. After Tai Chi said this, his tone changed, and he hesitated slightly. I heard that when Jiujing arranges the throne, he doesn't pick talents and only chooses people who are willing to listen to him. When I think about it, this method makes a lot of sense. Or they could simply choose from the soldiers under the monarch's command. This is just my opinion. Please reconsider. This time, Zhongsho smiled but did not say anything. Generally speaking, this method was the safest. However, he had his own plans for this. Zhongsho chose the main hall of the Yuanjing Palace to receive the 7 monarchs. Without a doubt, this was the grandest place in Yuanjing Palace. For 1,000 feet from north to south were all made of red sandalwood and agarwood. The fragrance wafted for 1,000 miles, and it was magnificent. Compared to Zhongsho's Chongzheng Palace, it was much better. One person sitting at the top of the hall and looking down, only to feel that a 10,000-strong army could be easily accommodated. At this moment, the 7 monarchs, along with the emperor race, all trembled as they bowed under his throne. Actually, it was not only the emperor race who came to greet him. There were also ministers and generals of the 7 countries who had a little bit of power here. It was bustling with activity, and there were at least 1,000 people. Their expressions were either respectful, curious, mocking, or calm. However, they all bowed down and were extremely respectful. Zhongsho casually glanced around. When he saw the dozens of people at the front, he instantly frowned. Zhongsho was a hero. Even when he was bullied in Linhai College, he never bowed to anyone. Even if he died, his back would be straightened. Therefore, the people he couldn't stand the most were people who were like mud. However, thinking back to what Jiujing did before, he only listened to people obediently. He only chose to listen to him. Those true talents were just used, but he didn't give them important positions. Looking at the people in the hall, they all looked like they didn't care, or maybe they had expected this. Some were cold and distant, some were fawning, some had cold gazes, trying their best to hide the hatred in their eyes. Zhongsho smiled and retracted his gaze. Where is the great Xian country ruler? The moment he said this, a long while later, a middle-aged man stood up with an ashen white face and bowed in front of Zhongsho. Little King Do greets, celestial ruler. Zhongsho didn't even look at him. You were conferred by Jiujing. It is said that in the past 20 years, you have been conferred the title of Jiujing. You followed his orders to bully the people and pillage, causing numerous people to starve and eat each other. He smiled bitterly. Jujing instructed him to do all of this. So did he dare to not follow? If he did, he would probably lose his life. Before he was able to explain, Zhongshou waved his sleeves. Today, the Celestial Dynasty has changed. Jujing is already dead, so you should wipe out the country. After you take over with the new king, you can bring your entire family and leave Yuanren world. Remember that when you leave, you must help the new ruler to stabilize the country. If not, I might go back on my words. The moment he said these words, he was first shocked and then delighted. He actually didn't die with Jujing and was able to leave safely. This outcome made him delighted. As for the following instructions, it was expected. He knew that this was the price of living. At this moment, even the deathly look in the eyes of the other few country rulers retreated. A look of anticipation appeared in their eyes. Zhongshou then asked, "Great Xiankun Province Governor He Daoren, who is he?" There were 7 countries in the southwest of the Yuanren world. Each country was half a state of land and had 5 provinces under them. The Kunnan province governor was the smallest in the country and also the weakest. However, due to it being at the border, they had strong troops. That Kunnan province governor, He Daoren, was a muscular young man around 30. When he heard this, he obviously didn't expect that Zhongshou would call out to him. He couldn't help but feel shocked. Then, his expression turned solemn as he stood out. Xian country small minister, He Daoren greets celestial ruler. Zhongshou smiled and sized up this person. A weird expression flashed across his eyes. Under the pressure of his soul, he was able to be neither arrogant nor servile. He was a decent person. No wonder the few hidden guards under Ruoshe respected this person so much. I heard that in the few years you have been in office, you have resisted taxes 3 times. Is that true? He Daoren kept silent and didn't reply. That matter did happen, but he had no choice. Kunnan province was just too poor and had no way to support it. Actually, in his heart, he didn't want to do that and put himself in danger. Anyways, he had a clear conscience. If the celestial ruler wanted to use his head to show off his might, then he had nothing to say. You have quite a lot of political skills as well. At least in these 3 years, the number of people who starved to death in Kunnan province was the least out of the 8 provinces of Xian country. As he said that, Zhongshou's expression and tone suddenly became solemn. Your character and personality are all top quality. From today on, you can become the ruler of Xian country. Let me ask you, are you willing to work for my Qian celestial dynasty? The moment he said those words, not only was He Daoren startled, the people in the palace were all shocked. Those who were secretly rejoicing in others' misfortune almost bit their tongues. In their eyes, this was the person who had the least chance of succeeding the throne. Tai Chi and Zhao Yinran both stood up, their brows tightly furrowed. The 2 of them had heard of this Kunnan province governor before. It was said that he had his own opinions. Once he succeeded, he might not listen to the Qian and Zhongshou. He Daoren was stunned for a moment, and then his brows furrowed. In the end, he sighed and bowed. How would I dare not work for you? Thank you, celestial ruler, for your kindness. Zhongshou smiled and knew what He Daoren was worried about. He was afraid that this person valued reputation more than power. He was also worried about how to satisfy the demands of the celestial dynasty in the future. For now, he didn't bother and continued to deal with the other 6 country rulers. Like a sharp knife cutting through a tangled knot, he quickly decided on the candidates. If it was before, Feng Taiji thought that this person was just a special case. In the end, every monarch who succeeded to the throne was a capable person within the country. Although they weren't as outstanding as He Daoren, they were all extraordinary. They were either famous for their governance ability and were known for being righteous, or they were in charge of the military and had great achievements. This caused the close to 1,000 people in the hall to be totally silent. In the end, Zhongshou didn't stop and said leisurely, "My Qian celestial dynasty is different from Jujing, and we don't like to force people. If you 7 countries are willing to be protected by me, you can pay 20% of your taxes to the celestial dynasty. If you aren't willing, You don't have to pay. Naturally, if something happens in the future, I won't protect you. Treat it as you being removed from the Deqian vassals. As Tai Chi listened on, his hands started to crack. This Zhong Shou was really generous. Even if he didn't take 50% of taxes like Jiujing, there was no reason for him to lower it to 20%. He actually wanted these people to be willing. Was this blood-sword monster lord crazy? The hall was in an uproar as everyone exchanged glances with one another. Some were filled with disbelief, and some were surprised. A bright glow flashed in Edoran's eyes. Zhong Shou's words continued. If you mortals find any treasures, I will bring them to you. You can bring it to my Yuanjing palace. I will send someone to trade it for something of equal value. Mind stones, mind artifacts, martial arts, and spiritual techniques. I will announce this matter to the world. At the start, Tai Chi was furious, but now he had already calmed down. What was this Zhong Shou trying to do? What was he trying to do by making such a promise? Zhong Shou smiled, suddenly looking toward the person in the hall with deep meaning. It was a 40-year-old middle-aged man who was handsome and had a beautiful beard. At this moment, he was trying his best to hide in the crowd so that he didn't look weird. However, just now, that moment of fluctuation in his heart revealed his foundations. This is the person that Ruoshui was talking about. He is really interesting. Zhong Shou broke into a laugh. Did this person really think that? Did he really think that he could hide in front of him? He wasn't Jiujing. If Taoist, he could be described as a hero. Then this person was a true hero. Apart from that, there is one more thing. I will choose strong people from the 7 countries to enter the Celestial Dynasty army. If you feel that you have the talent to cultivate, you can come to Yuanjing Palace. This time, there are 3 sects that have followed me over. Song Shengdao, Kenzo sect, Buddhist faction. They all have long life methods, be it martial path or spiritual technique. They're all at the peak. People from Yuanren world can enter their sect. Tai Chi's face twisted. He couldn't help but smash the bronze cup in his hand into pieces. To be continued. Chapter 839. When the nobles who had come to see him all left, Zhong Shou's expression changed. The atmosphere within the hall instantly became really solemn. Tai Chi and Zhao Yinran's faces were green as they looked at Zhong Shou in confusion. Before this, they gave this fellow face and didn't want the Yuanren world people to see the differences between them. This was why they didn't open their mouths to interrupt and question Zhong Shou's words. At this moment, the outsiders weren't here anymore, so naturally it was time to settle the score. Ruler is so generous, reducing the tax by a full 30% just like that. Even after the battle in the underground lake a few years ago, Feng Taiji's personality had become much calmer. At this moment, his tone was filled with a mocking intent. As for the matter of the countries being willing, he was too lazy to talk about it. Also, the country rulers that ruler chose are all outstanding people in the Yuanren world who are ambitious. Once such people take power, they won't be willing to be controlled by others. His tone was filled with worry. Surrounded by wolves, Zhong Shou felt like it wasn't troublesome enough. Zhong Shou laughed heartlessly. Brother Feng, what is the use of the tax to us? Can we use it in the current situation? Tai Chi's brows rose up. Jiujing collected taxes to raise an army. Without a huge army, it would be tough to defend against the attacks of the surrounding countries. Then, he had an idea. To them, these taxes didn't have much use. They only had 300,000 soldiers. Even if they were recruited from the Yuanren world, they were squeezed dry for hundreds of years, and the people had no way to make a living. It was hard for them to remain loyal. For example, Recluse Jiujing recruited soldiers from his original small world. Now, most of them were taken away by those spirit realm cultivators who fled. Looking at these 7 countries, they do need to rest up and let them take a breather. Moreover, the people of the 7 countries are terrified. If they weren't such talents, how would they be able to stabilize the situation within a month? It was good to be mediocre and only know how to be a yes man. However, today we are in a situation where danger is everywhere. Knowing that Tai Chi was an extremely intelligent person, Zhong Shou only spoke to the point and did not say much. Tai Chi was deep in thought. his eyes flashing with understanding. That was indeed the case. The people that Zhongsho had chosen all had one thing in common other than their talents. They were powerful and had enough resources and connections. It was indeed possible to control the overall situation in the shortest amount of time, unite the hearts of the people, and resist external aggression. Then, this 20% tax had a deeper meaning. This test is not bad, but it can only deal with the current situation. There will still be some hidden dangers in the future. How are we going to control these 7 nations in the future? Why do we need to control them? It will suffice as long as we have those people serve us willingly. Zhongsho could not help but laugh. It's not up to them. Tai Chi thought that, as expected, the 20% tax had restored the hearts of the people of the 7 nations. It also meant that the new rulers of the 7 countries had to go all out. Now that they had become rulers of a country, although their identities were noble, they had lost the ability to turn things around. If the Qin backed out of the Yuanren world, then their subjects might be able to live. As for the 7 rulers led by Hidauren, they had no chance of living. Even if it was for their own lives, they had to work with the Qin. As for the future, if the Yuanren world fell into their hands, they didn't need to care about these 7 people. He thought to himself that this was probably the difference between him and Zhongsho. Although this fellow said that he wasn't good at scheming, he was magnanimous. He was also good at controlling the situation, causing people to serve him no matter if they were willing or not. As compared to this person, he was indeed a little narrow-minded. No wonder this person was able to build up such a foundation in just a few years. Shaking his head slightly, the weight in Tai Chi's heart dissipated a little. However, there was still one more thing that he needed to think about. Forget about all that. Tai Chi really doesn't know why our Kinzo sect wants to open a mountain to accept disciples in the Yuanren world. Zhao Yinran scoffed coldly. Also, since when is it the ruler's turn to make decisions for our common people path? Actually, with Zhongsho's identity, naturally, he could make the decision. However, to accept people from the Yuanren world as disciples, he felt that it was inconceivable. Zhongsho blinked his eyes in confusion. Instead, he looked at the 2 of them in shock. Didn't the 2 of you know that Zifeng has already chosen a location in the Yuanren world and is prepared to open 10 temples at once? Tai Chi's brow rose up. He had heard about this matter, but what did it have to do with them accepting disciples? Zhongsho smiled and asked, "Then let me ask you, why did you all come? Conquering other worlds, is it to plunder resources or to strengthen the foundations of the sect? After taking down this world, how are we going to defend it? Is the Kinzo sect not prepared to expand outside of the Yuanren world?" The population of the Cloud world was really limited. If they were like the Lu family, occupying 800 worlds, they would definitely need numerous cultivators and huge armies. Just the strength of the Cloud world alone wouldn't be able to provide that. Feng Taiji was startled. Clearly, he realized what was going on. They didn't think about continuing to expand to the outer regions. However, if they could have such gains like the Yuanren world, it would be great. The strength of the 7 sects of the Kinzo sect could take care of one Yuanren world. However, if they had some foundations in this world, it would reduce the pressure on the sect. They could also choose the best disciples in this world. Speaking of which, the Buddhist faction was the same. Thinking about that, he still frowned. The people of the Yuanren world have different physiques from our Cloud world people. Pretty much the same. Zhongsho shook his head. He had always suspected that the people of the Cloud world might have moved in from the outer regions. Why were they so similar? Like the Lu family, they were pretty much no different from the people of the Cloud world. With Brother Feng's ability, you shouldn't be troubled by this cultivation method matter, right? Tai Chi's teeth felt sour when he heard that. His face alternated between green and white. In the end, he gritted his teeth. I need to ask the elders of the vast habitat before I make a decision. If the Cloud World side really agreed, then this cultivation method would be a headache for the Saint Realm and God Realm experts in the sect. In his heart, he felt that something wasn't right. Following Zhongsho over was just a small test by the Kinzo sect. They were just trying to see if they could plunder some resources from the outer regions to strengthen the sect. Why did things change at this moment? Zhongsho smiled. Above Spirit Realm in the Kenzo sect, most of them had traveled the outer regions and had seen much more than Tai Chi. Then he looked towards Zhao Yinran. In the Yuanren world, there is no Taoist faction or Confucian faction. There aren't many places where Song Sheng Dao can spread his teachings. Isn't the environment here suitable for your sect to spread your teachings? If you can take over Yuanren, I can let Song Sheng Dao control one state. Zhao Yinran's face was conflicted. She wasn't interested in Song Sheng Dao's teachings. However, she knew that if those people in the Song Sheng Dao sect found out, they would be delighted and extremely excited. Even those elders would be delighted. They would most probably be delighted and like Zhongsho more and more. Thinking about it for a moment, she couldn't find a reason to retort. In the end, Zhao Yinran shook her head with a weird expression. Reducing taxes, taking in disciples, and exchanging spiritual items. Why do I feel like we aren't here to plunder Yuanren world, but to do good things? To think that she had already made preparations a month ago. If there was a need, she would start a massacre in the Yuanren world. She, Zhao Yinran, didn't lack sure methods. What nonsense are you talking about? Maida Qian has always loved the people like my children and built our country on filial piety. Since the Yuanren 7 countries are vassals, then I will treat the people of those countries as my people. Why would I plunder them? Zhongsho's face was solemn when he heard that. His tone was firm, like he was furious at Zhao Yinran's words. His face was filled with righteousness. Yinran, you need to remember that Maida Qian can't bear for the people of the Yuanren world to suffer, which is why I came from so far away. To save the people of the Yuanren world from the sea of bitterness. What is it called? That's right, liberation. Even if we collect 20% of the tax and take some mind stones, it is necessary to chase away evil demons. Tai Chi couldn't help but laugh. So ruler is prepared to open a market under the Yuanjing Palace. This was the first time he felt something. This Qian ruler was really interesting. He came a plunderer, but he made it sound like he was doing it for the greater good. He roughly understood Zhongsho's intentions. Since he wanted to be righteous, he could only do things like that. At this moment, he didn't have any thoughts of objecting. In the past, Jiujing's way of doing things was to let the 7 countries pay tribute. Zhongsho's way of doing things was undoubtedly much smarter. Using items to exchange, they said that it was an exchange of items of equal value. However, as for how to set the price, it was still up to them. Moreover, things that were rare in other places were really normal in the Yuanren world. Things that the Yuanren world didn't have were also many in the Cloud world. Exchanging what one didn't have, just by earning the difference, one would be able to earn a lot. He roughly comprehended that although Zhongsho's method was a little gentle, it wasn't like Jiujing to totally control the Yuanren world. However, it was much more subtle. In the end, what they obtained might not be any worse than Jiujing. He slowly calmed down. Doing things like that seemed like a good idea. That's right. Zhongsho nodded his head in delight. His expression was one of praise for being able to be taught. To be able to use gentle methods to plunder resources. Why do they have to be stained with blood and fight to the death? He smiled. I am doing things like that because I am thinking about your 3 factions. Since you are participating, I naturally have to take care of you. If I don't gain the hearts of the Yuanren people, how will I be able to spread the teachings? In his words, there was a hint of, you should remember to appreciate his kindness. Zhao Yinran was speechless. That was right. Just at this moment, outside of the hall, Zifeng stepped in and bowed solemnly. Ruler is merciful. Our Buddhist faction is really grateful. He looked at Zhongsho with a complicated expression. Before this, he was still worried. At this moment, he was sure that the Buddhist faction would be able to prosper in the Yuanren world. To meet such a ruler was the fortune of the Buddhist faction. At the same time, within the Cloud world, Kong Rue walked out of the room in shock and looked above. That was the giant silver dragon that was flying in the air, its head held high, its roar spreading all about. Beside the giant dragon was the phoenix shadow. Dragon energy blazing? That doesn't seem right. Kong Rue picked up the 1 king divination money and looked closely. His expression became weirder and weirder. What exactly did Junshang do in the outer region, causing dragons and phoenixes to roar? Chapter 840. After convincing Tai Chi and the others, there was still the abdication ceremony. This was an official ceremony to make the old rulers of the 7 countries abdicate, and then the dead Qian people confer titles. Everything was handled by Zifeng, who was a Buddhist, and he actually did it well. After this step, the Yuanren 7 countries were truly under the Qian. Just a few days later, countless people had gathered at the foot of Yuanjing Palace. Some people brought various treasures over to exchange for some money. Most of them came to join the 3 factions that Zhongsho mentioned. The current Yuanren world was like the cloud world 20,000 years ago. Be it martial path or spiritual cultivation, they were all really shallow. Even if they wanted to cultivate, there was nowhere to learn. This time Zhongsho opened a door for them without any signs. No matter if it was real or fake, they had to try. The bustling and bustling below the Yuanjing Palace made the elders of the Kongqi and Danquan sects delighted. The 2 sects specialized in artifact crafting and pill refining, and exchanging spiritual items was cheap. This time, there were many blacksmiths and pill refiners who followed. In a short few days, they earned a crazy amount. Naturally, there were also people who came for the wealth of the mortal world. What cultivators didn't care about the most were precisely these things. As for accepting disciples, the Kinzo sect Song Shangdao and the few other people in charge were a little against it at the start. But once, by chance, a cultivator of the Wujue villa actually chose an extremely talented young man from a group of refugees that rushed over from nearby and made him enter the sect. The entire Yuanjing Palace was instantly in an uproar. The difference between the people of the Yuanren world and the cloud world was really small. Even if there was a difference, it was just some meridians and positions which could be easily changed. As for many other areas like comprehension, bones, heart, etc., they were all the same. The soul was the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. There was no difference. In other words, the people of this world might have a chance to reach the saint realm. Even if his future achievements were limited, he would still be a great addition to Song Xingdao and the Kinzo sect, which were lacking in manpower. In just a few days, his reluctance had turned into enthusiasm, and he was willing to give it his all. They even quarreled in front of Zhongsho over the disciple quota. After more than 10 days, he had indeed obtained dozens of extremely talented disciples. Unfortunately, most of the people who were sent to Yuanjing Palace at this time were the children of nobles, and they were all side branches that were not valued. The leaders of the 7 nations wanted to curry favor with the Yuanjing Palace and wanted to give it a try. But they were also afraid of taking the risk, so they only sent the concubine-born children. This action made Tai Chi and the other spirit realm elders of Song Shengdao very unhappy. Thus, they decided to be like the Buddhist sects and set up branches in various spiritual lands within the 7 nations to make it easier for them to search. However, at this time, they hadn't gained a stable footing, which was why they temporarily gave up. A month later will be the true test. However, if it was before, the 3 factions only had the thought that they didn't care about this Yuanren world and that it was enough to just scour it. However, at this moment, they were truly prepared to fight to the death. They say the heroes are born in times of chaos. Heroes are born in times of danger. The Yuanren world is in deep trouble, and I can look on from the sidelines. In your Yuanren world, there are too many talented people who can succeed in the cultivation path. They aren't inferior to our cloud world 100 years ago. Above the Yuanjing Palace, Zhongsho leaned on the railing and stood there. He looked excitedly at the huge market below that was starting to take shape. In the past, there were only some houses and inns that were convenient for people who came to worship Jujing to stay. At this moment, there were many houses 100,000 feet from north to south. There were hundreds of thousands of people gathered here. At this moment, the person who was listening to him speak was a 30-year-old male. It was the person who Zhongsho paid attention to that day in the main hall of the Yuanjing Palace. At this moment, he was really calm as he stood behind Zhongsho. His actions weren't arrogant or servile. and he was also polite. When he heard this, he shook his head slightly. I don't know whether or not our Yuanren world has many talents. However, I know that this time, if Celestial Ruler didn't show mercy, these people would be mediocre for the rest of their lives. At most, in 70 to 80 years, they would turn into a cup of dust. Celestial Ruler's kindness is akin to giving them a new lease on life. Our Yuanren world people will be eternally grateful. His tone was filled with heartfelt respect. Is that so? Does this include you, Zhuangyu? Zhongshu laughed, and then he heard a moment of silence behind him. He didn't care and continued to ask, I heard that during these 10 years, the eastern front of the Yuanren front was on the eastern front. The entire eastern front of Great Lin is maintained by you, Zhuangyu alone. Zhujing relied on you a lot. He is one of the few famous generals in the Yuanren world. Great Lin was beside Xian country. Its land area was slightly bigger, having 8 provinces of land. However, due to a large portion of its borders being in the east, it had many wars. It was the weakest out of the 7 countries. However, this situation changed 10 years ago. This Zhuangyu appeared out of nowhere, using the identity of a commoner to stand out in a huge battle. At 24 years old, he led 30,000 troops and defeated enemies 4 times his size, following which he was unstoppable and won consecutively. It caused the countries under Judu, Xianting Hongjiuchen to not dare to easily invade the West. It also made Zhujing delighted, even making an exception for him and bestowing him with a few outer region cultivation techniques. I don't dare to accept the title of Celestial Ruler, Zhuang Fan said expressionlessly. However, I do have some ability to lead troops. His words weren't filled with arrogance, but with confidence. Zhongshu nodded his head slightly. That is indeed the case. After I found out, I specially checked your battle records. However, I noticed something really interesting. In the recent 3 years, you had a chance to win 4 consecutive battles. However, you restrained yourself, retreating and not fighting when you gained some small gains. Zhuang Fan's gaze was like a needle, stabbing right into Zhongshu's back. Zhongshu didn't care at all, acting like he didn't notice anything. Are you trying to raise the enemy for your own sake, or are you worried that Jiujing will get rid of you? Or is it that Zhuang Fan suddenly became kind? Zhuang Fan wanted to argue, but Zhongshu's cold gaze suddenly looked back at him, filled with a cold disdain. If you want to argue, you don't have to. You should know that people like you and me only need to believe in the truth. Then, evidence and the like don't matter. You can hide from Jiujing, but you can't hide from me. Cold sweat instantly appeared on Zhuang Fan's forehead. A moment later, he cupped his fists and said solemnly, who knew that ruler was also an expert in the art of war. There is indeed such a matter. However, I had no choice. No choice? You were ambitious, right? Training troops in the dark and hiding the news. Zhuang Fan, what do you want? Zhongshu burst out into a laugh, filled with a cold intent. With your talent, you are 10 times better than Idaren. The army you hold is 3 times that of him. Now, you hate me in your heart. Not only did he not choose you to be the ruler of the 7 countries, but he also took away your military power. Zhuang Fan's body shook, his face ashen white. He gritted his teeth and said, that Jiujing is tyrannical in our Yuanren world, taking what he wants. Many of my family members have died. Because of this, even if I want to rebel, it is right. Chapter 841. That Jiujing has been tyrannical in my Yuanren world, taking what he wants. Many of my loved ones have died. Because of this, even if I want to rebel, it is normal. His voice was sonorous and carried an incomparably dense resentment, as well as extreme helplessness. Normal? This reason is not bad. I just hope that you are sincere. Zhongshu nodded slightly, and then a bright glow flashed in his eyes. Then what if I kill Jiujing, Hong Jiuchen, Tanjing, and the others work together to kill me? Then, the Yuanren world will continue to fall. With your intelligence, you should have made preparations, right? Zhuang Yu's pupils constricted and his face turned ashen white. He suddenly understood that all the words that Zhong Shou said before were just for this sentence. His mouth couldn't help but feel dry. He wanted to retort, but he didn't know what to say. He only felt that the person in front of him had seen through him, and he had no secrets at all. He also knew that even if he tried to retort, this person wouldn't care. The strength that this person grasped was far stronger than his. As for him, he had no way to fight back. Life and death were in his hands. Just this point alone made all his schemes and all the strength that he had accumulated for so many years become useless. In fact, just one suspicion was enough. Why would a person with power need to reason with others? If you don't speak, then I will take it as you admitting it. Zhong Shou turned around and continued to look at the market below with interest. This famous general of the Yuanren world was already in his hands and couldn't escape. I'm really worried about people like you and don't dare to be the ruler of a region. You have no chance to be the ruler of a country, but I can let you be the front army commander of the Deqian Celestial Dynasty. Control the armies of the 4 countries and be in charge of the war in the east. You should be able to find out a little about the current situation. My Deqian isn't stable yet, and I am at a loss as to how to deal with it. I can only rely on you. A month later, if you can defeat the eastern countries, everything will be fine, and I will repay you. If you don't win, then I will chop off your head before I leave. The position of commander-in-chief of the 5 armies was only below the inspector of the 5 armies. However, it was this Qian immortal dynasty that was like an empty shell and not the Qian nation of the cloud world. It was to temporarily deal with the current situation. As for what would happen after that, whether or not he would get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness would depend on this fellow's performance. Zhuangyu was startled once more. A moment later, he bowed with a complicated expression. Thank you, Celestial Lord, for thinking highly of me. The immortal monarch was indeed magnanimous. 1 month later, regardless of whether it is a great victory or a difficult situation, Zhuangyu will do his best to force the enemy back. However, he didn't feel anything at all. It was because he was very clear that this was just an exchange. From the beginning to the end, it was filled with coercion and threats. There was no room for him to refute, nor was there any room for discussion. He didn't even bother to hide his suspicions and wariness. As a result, the tone of his second sentence was extremely strange. It was unknown whether it was praise or sarcasm. Magnanimous? Zhong Shou laughed and touched his chin. He looked young too early, and his chin was still really smooth. He didn't have a beard, which he had always regretted. However, who knows, he might really be magnanimous. Actually, he only had some guesses about Zhuangyu's hidden plans these few years. As for whether or not this person would succeed in the future, he didn't know. However, 10 years later, the God Emperor led the army to conquer everywhere. However, he faced setbacks in this Yuanren world and was blocked for a full 7 years. Due to the battle in the Yuanren world, which involved large amounts of troops, he wasn't able to quickly unify the Cloud world. In front of the Kong Yao army, they lost many battles. At their worst, they were nearly chased out of the Cloud world. If not for the power struggle within the Taishang, the Liao king who inherited the throne was too suspicious of Kong Yao. Whether or not the Taishang would fall in the end was another matter. However, Zhong Shou had always been curious about the person who blocked the God Emperor for 7 years in the Yuanren world. Unfortunately, in the history books, there weren't any records of this person. He was drowned in the river of time, and there were no traces of him at all. He didn't know whether or not this person was him. But looking at it now, he was the most likely one. Who knows whether or not his will existed in this world? Looking at the various worlds, each time a world was in danger, numerous heroes would be born, rising and falling. The Yuanren world was like that. So was the Cloud world. Zhong Shou's mind was filled with random thoughts, but in the end, he retracted his thoughts. Are you referring to how I can tolerate a traitor like you in a chaotic world? The muscles on Zhuangyu's face twitched, but he still lowered his body and said, a traitor in a chaotic world can be a good minister in a peaceful world. Are you reminding me that I can't give you any chances in the future? Zhong Shou smiled. I will remember. I will also hope that you will be more careful when you do such things in the future. I am not judging. Zhuang Yu smiled bitterly. How would I dare to lie in front of celestial ruler? You don't dare? Does that include your cultivation at the peak of the spirit realm? Zhong Shou's lips curled up in delight. Although he didn't use his eyes, he could clearly sense it. Zhuang Yu's body trembled slightly. It was obvious that he was shocked. Are you waiting a few years to break through to celestial realm before you act? That Jujing probably didn't expect that a few years later, the general he has high hopes for would personally take his life. While he said this, he shook his head. Fan always said that he liked to pretend to be a pig to eat the tiger. How wrong was that? In terms of pretending to be a pig, this fellow was the one. He asked curiously, looking at your cultivation technique, it is not bad. Did you create it yourself, or did you learn it from others? That's right. Since it is the aura concealment technique, to be able to hide from Jujing, you must have come from the outer region. Who are you relying on? Zhuang Yu's face was ashen. He gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. A few days ago, he had a feeling that although Zhong Shou wasn't as crazy and unrestrained as Jujing, he was much stronger than Jujing. He was much more problematic than Jujing and was hard to deal with. Waiving 30% tax seemed like a merciful action. However, the rulers of the various countries risked their own safety to protect their country. They still needed to use their military to collect taxes from the people. However, the grievances of the people didn't belong to the Qian celestial dynasty anymore. He wantonly recruited disciples in the Yuanren world, causing the elites of this world to be tied together with these people from the cloud world. During these days, he even set up porridge stalls outside the market to help refugees. The people were ignorant, and in a few months, they would treat these people as their saviors. They would think that they were different from Jiujing and were celestials who saved them from their pain. How would they know how vicious and cunning this Qian celestial dynasty ruler was? If it was a few days ago, he still had some hope. However, at this moment, he couldn't see any hope at all. He even had an urge that, even if he died, he would drag this person down with him. Do you want to go all out and die together with me? Zhong Shou shook his head slightly. Think about it carefully. Even if you do it, I will just back out of the Yuanren world. However, the people of this world will still have a tough life. However, if you are in my hands, naturally your lives will be better. My people, no matter which world they are from, will be treated equally. Zhuang Yu was startled and raised his head to look at Zhong Shou. The hatred in his eyes retreated slightly as he solemnly cupped his fists. I will go all out. I only hope that in the future, ruler can keep your promise. Zhong Shou didn't say anything to him, casually tossing over a talisman decree along with a golden seal. Take care of yourself. After saying this, he stepped into the air and stepped into the 70,000 feet cloud layer. Although he barely managed to convince Zhuang Yu, he felt helpless in his heart. Zhuang Yu's life was in his hands. However, wasn't Zhong Shou's fate in a single thought of this person? However, he had no choice. The strength in his hands was just too weak. 300,000 elites seemed like a lot, but in such an outer region battle, it wasn't much. What gave him a headache was that the Liu family person could chase over at any moment. As such, Zhong Shou couldn't go all out at this moment. Apart from that, he was also really unfamiliar with the people, things, and matters of the Yuanren world. Even in terms of formations, he felt that he wasn't any weaker than those unparalleled talents who didn't appear in the world. However, in the art of war, the biggest taboo was to not know the enemy well and not have any other thoughts. At this moment, he could only rely heavily on Zhuang Yu. He wanted to use his ability as well as what this person had done over these decades to get past this first hurdle. Outer region battles are really tough. Zhong Shou sighed his heart. He couldn't blame the Taoist and demon sects for not having high hopes for him. Even if he had the support of end realm experts, it was still the same. During these 10,000 years, the two factions had plotted against the outer region many times. Maybe because they had been taught a huge lesson, they were afraid of everything. He continued east, and in just half a day, he arrived at the southeast region of the Yuanren world. Just as he was about to reach the border, a powerful wolf swept across the area. When it touched Zhong Shou, The intent stopped and was slightly surprised. Zhong Shou smiled and didn't continue forwards. He stopped at the border and waited quietly. Then, a few hours later, a figure flashed and appeared 10,000 zhang away from him. He wore a crown and a star-patterned feather cloth. He gave off an extraordinary aura as he bowed towards Zhong Shou. "What does the Qian ruler want from me?" he said coldly. "If you want to persuade me to stop or to join hands with me, then you don't have to." Zhong Shou didn't care, still casually bowing back. Zhong Shou greets Shinran Mu. "What a joke. I came today just to see your face, and I have already achieved my wish. I am satisfied." Mu Fong was startled. He didn't understand at first, but then he understood. As long as he appeared here and talked to Zhong Shou, even if they didn't reach an agreement, those people would still have their suspicions. He looked around and felt that be it sound patterns or spiritual sense, they were all blocked. All of them had been completely blocked off and could not be transmitted outside. However, Zhong Shou's strength was far above his. At this moment, he wanted to break it, but he was unable to. He stopped thinking about other things and laughed coldly. "Ruler is really scheming." Zhong Shou nodded his head in delight. "It isn't that I am scheming. It is that you all are suspicious of one another." If he didn't want to hear what Zhong Shou would say and what conditions he would promise, why would he come here? Chapter 842. Mu Fong was speechless. Even if he wanted to retort, there was nothing he could say. He really couldn't blame Zhong Shou for coming over this time. However, he was also a talent and knew that there was no point in regretting now. His eyes flashed and he smiled. "Forget it. Since things have reached such a stage, I want to hear what Ruler wants to say. I don't believe that Ruler lured me over just to meet." "Of course." Zhong Shou nodded his head and said seriously, "Out of the few powers in the Yuanren world, Brother Hong is the strongest. I don't understand. Do you all really want him to swallow up the Southwest? Do you want to see this Yuanren world fall into the hands of the Judas Yinding? Even if I give you some benefits and give you some land, how long can you last? Once the Southwest problem is solved, you won't need to face enemies on all sides. Brother Hong's strength won't be able to be replicated." Mu Fong listened on quietly. His face was cold and stiff, not wavering at all. "If that is the case, then my Hanling order will just give him all of the Yuanren world. What we lose here can be taken from other places. It is just an exchange." "That is true. However, it will only benefit the Hanling order. Brother Mu's hundreds of years of hard work in this Yuanren world will all go down the drain." Zhong Shou's brow rose up coldly, filled with a mocking intent. "Let me ask you, is this really what you want? What else can I do?" Mu Fong scoffed coldly. It was okay if Ruler didn't agree to Tanjing. After agreeing to it, he would have to bind himself. Now you only have 300,000 troops and 16 spirit realm experts. With such little strength, you will be wiped out in a day. Do you want me to join hands with you and end up with nothing? Even if Ruler has a 3-inch tongue, you won't be able to move my heart. When did I say that I want you to join hands with me to face the enemy? Seeing that Mu Fong was startled, Zhong Shou smiled faintly. "If I don't have enough strength, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for Brother Mu to feel at ease. What I want to discuss with Brother Mu is after Hong Jiuchen suffered a setback. Is Brother Mu not tempted by the hinterland of the Central Plains?" Only then did Mu Fong's expression change. This Qian monarch actually had such confidence? Could it be that he really had some other trump card? Looking closely at Zhong Shou's expression, he couldn't see anything. However, during this period of time, he had carefully inquired about this person. In the Cloud world, it was said that they surprised many times, causing the Taoist faction, which even the Hanling order feared, to suffer defeat after defeat. Perhaps this time, he really had some confidence. That was hard to say. The light in his eyes flickered as he hesitated. He was unwilling to give the Yuanren world to Hong Jiuchen. However, the person before him was even more dangerous than Hong Jiuchen. Thinking about it for a moment, thinking about it repeatedly, Mu Fong still shook his head, his lips filled with mocking intent. "I think Monarch has gone mad. At this time, You aren't thinking about how to preserve your strength and safely leave the Yuanren world. Instead, you came from so far away to persuade me. I really don't know if Monarch is really bold or too arrogant. This outer region wasn't the cloud world that had been peaceful for a long time. Even if this person was really famous in the cloud world, he was still a newbie in the outer region. Which one of them hadn't gone through numerous battles and walked out from numerous death battles? With that little strength before he was able to gain a stable footing, what waves could he cause? If I was the monarch, I definitely wouldn't agree to follow the outer region rules. That is really stupid. But what if? What if Hong Jiuchen falls to my hands? Even if all of you work together, can you beat me? Zhong Shou squinted, not commenting on the last sentence of this person. He was persuaded by Tan Jing because of himself, which was also a huge problem. You should think about this matter. If that cultivator Hong wins, you have no chance at all. However, if this matter isn't harmonious, if you can occupy the mid-planes, you will have a chance to unify the Yuanren world. Why are you afraid of the Hanling order and not helping you? Seeing that Mufang's face was green and he didn't speak, Zhong Shou smiled and didn't rush him. He knew that Mufang was already tempted. If he continued to rush him, it wouldn't be good. He didn't even say goodbye before stepping into the air and leaving. Joining forces, it was just like that. This time, although the Yuanren world worked together, they might not all be wholehearted and have no other thoughts. Between them, there would be all sorts of conflicts. There might be a chance to take advantage of. When things are going well, everything could be hidden. However, if they were defeated, conflicts would most likely explode out. He had only come here today to increase this opportunity to the greatest extent. He sighed in his heart that he didn't have a suitable strategist. This kind of matter of persuading the House of Zhang could only be done personally. Their standards were too far apart, and he was secretly ashamed of himself. Just as he was flying through the air, less than 3,000 miles away, he suddenly felt a gaze looking over from the distance. It was ice-cold and filled with a mocking intent. Interesting. Let me see how you struggle. Coldly, the spiritual sense turned back. Zhong Shou's brow rose up as he stood still in the air. This person is Hong Jiuchen. His strength was indeed extraordinary, but he was much stronger than before. There seems to be another person, Tan Fong. As expected, the two of them are working together. Zhong Shou broke into a laugh. With the strength of the celestial order, they didn't have the ability to fight for this Yuanren world. They could only choose one side to join and get some benefits. Looking at the situation, did they really think that he had fallen into the trap of the two of them? Following which, Zhong Shou didn't head to other regions. He only sent out a few message talismans to all directions before returning to the Yuanjing Palace. Such a method only needed to be used once. If he used it too much, it wouldn't be good. This time, there were many explanations for Mufang returning. Maybe he returned without any results and gave up on convincing the others. Or maybe the two of them had already come to an agreement. If not, why would they stop with just one person? What was fake was real. What was real was fake. To confirm that Mufang and Xianling Guild didn't have any other intentions, Zhidu Xianing would have to rack his brains. After returning to the Yuanjing Palace, Zhong Shou started his secluded meditation. He didn't bother about the outside world matters. He focused on the martial path and sacrificed himself to the sword formation. As expected, he handed all the war matters to Zhuang Fan. Only the 300,000 elites were personally deployed and occupied a few strategic locations. If Zhuang Fan won, these few areas could be easily chased. If Zhuang Fan lost, he could prevent the situation from deteriorating to the worst situation. At least he could defend a corner to plan for the future. Actually, he didn't bother about the outside world matters because he had no choice. He had already done what he should have done and what he could have done. No matter what other actions he took, it would be useless. Now, he could only see whether or not Zhuang Yu's methods would disappoint him. Speaking of which, this was the first time he had fallen to such a passive state. Chapter 843. Although he was in secluded meditation, Zhong Shou wasn't totally clueless about the outside world. Through Roa Shui and those hundreds of hidden guards, his feelers were still spreading out in all directions. He still wasn't able to find out about everything that was happening in the Yuanren world. However, he was able to understand the rough situation. He also knew that at this moment, there were at least 4 million troops spread out at the east border. They were all prepared and ready to strike. Pretty much every day that passed, there would be more troops rushing over from all over. 30 to 50,000, successfully creating an endless number of troops, the aura of an endless army. It was like a mountain and an ocean pressing down. This Hong Jiuchen really knows how to use troops. Who knows if it was done by his subordinates or himself? When an army went on a crusade to subdue the enemy without fighting, the most important thing was strength. If one's strength was enough, the enemy would be afraid, using troops to bully the enemy. This was the way of using troops. It was really smart. Zhongshu also sighed. Although he gave the people of the 7 countries and the nobles some hope, he didn't give them any hope. However, whether or not these people could hold on under the suppression of such a huge force was worrying. However, it wasn't that there wasn't any good news. The moment Zhuang Yu took over, he started to reorganize the troops and select elites. This person had never lost in 10 years of war and was really famous. The 7 country rulers all tried their best to cooperate. Everything was going smoothly. The second thing this person did was to send his entire family over to the Yuanjing Celestial Palace. Such a method was both to take hostages and also to entrust them. He handed the lives of his entire family over to Zhongshu to take care of. He wasn't the only one who did that. This person actually convinced the 7 country rulers to work together. He forcefully sent the families of the nobles and even pretty much all the 1,000 generals over to the Yuanjing Celestial Palace. With that, at least the army's morale can be stabilized. The general was the courage of the army. The person leading the army didn't have any other thoughts and was willing to fight to the death. Then, the combat strength of this army was enough to be relied on. The back was stable, and there was no need to worry about supplies. This was a strategy that couldn't be won so that one wouldn't lose. Just this move alone was enough for Zhongshu to predict. Even if Hong Jiuchen was able to reap some benefits by mobilizing his 10 million strong army, it would definitely be difficult for him to achieve what he wanted. But this guy is really full of confidence. A smile appeared on Zhongshu's face. A person like Zhuang Yu would not easily entrust his family to others. This method was not only to stabilize the morale of the troops, but also to gain their trust. Moreover, victory was most likely already in their grasp, and they would be able to withstand it. He was confident that Zhongshu would not do anything to his family. Even if he lost, he would have a clear conscience. Looking at how he arranged the troops and formations, it was also extremely ingenious. In some places, there were even deeper meanings. Even if he were to do it himself, it wouldn't be any better. Because he couldn't know himself and his enemy, he would be inferior. Now, he was starting to believe that this person could resist the divine emperor's army for 7 whole years. This person had planned for 6 or 7 years, and if he wanted to kill Jiujing, he would have killed Jiujing. If he wanted to kill Jiuchen, then the first thing he had to consider was that the other countries would work together to attack him. This was why he definitely had many methods. Even if he couldn't win, he definitely wouldn't lose. He was lucky to have won this round. His heart was totally at ease as Zhongshu laughed out loud. His heart that had been tense finally relaxed a little. The haze was gone. Then, he entered meditation once more. At this moment, he was perfecting the 3,000 star falling. He was comprehending the star Dao Seed and merging with the dragon pellet. This was the most crucial moment. However, since he came to the Yuanren world, only now was he able to put down everything and focus on studying. He still used the Book of Aeon Light to speed up time. This meditation took a full 20 days. Only then did Zhongshu slowly awaken. This day was the day he and Tan Jing agreed to meet. If nothing unexpected happened, Hong Jiuchen would make his move today. This time and space technique is really magical. The faster one is, the slower time is. If one's speed reaches the limit, one won't grow old. Not only speed, but the size and mass of an object can also affect the surrounding time and space. Zhongsho opened his eyes and then looked forwards with a startled expression. This was the moment of enlightenment he had gained 3 days ago. Thus, the mysteries of the entire world seemed to be revealed in front of his eyes. He only felt that the space in front of him was made up of several lines. They were all connected and couldn't be separated. All the Daos, all the developments were wrapped up within. The word Tao became even clearer in his mind. The ethereal and unreal feeling disappeared, and he saw a real Tao path. Even the star Tao seed in his soul remembrance began to change. The positions of many star dots were shifted and changed. There were also some invisible threads that connected them all together. Samurai had a weird expression on his face. Why do these star dots look so similar to the stars in the sky? There shouldn't have been any connection, but at this moment, he noticed. There wasn't much difference between the two. However, when Zhongsho displayed his heart space outside, it seemed more orthodox than the star-falling technique that the Taoist faction used to form from observing the stars in the sky. Each corner was filled with Tao aura. They all say that this starry sky is the manifestation of the heaven and earth grand Tao, which is why it has an indiscernible and vast strength. That is probably the case. When such a thought rose up in Zhongsho's mind, he was delighted. In other words, his 3,000 star falling technique was indeed compatible with the Grand Tao. After the star positions shifted, Zhongsho also noticed that the 10 extreme Imperial Tao destruction sword formation was becoming more and more useful. A technique, a sword formation, when used at the same time, there wasn't much disharmony. During these 20 days, although the number of star dragon pellets increased to 42, the number of 10 extreme dragon tooth swords was still at 24. However, Zhongsho felt that his combat strength had at least increased by 50%. All the stars could change according to his heart. All the dragon swords could be controlled by his heart. Even if the 10 extreme Imperial Tao destruction sword formation had its own will. However, if he was willing, he could suppress it. It wasn't like a few months ago when he was helpless. In another 10 days, my time sword intent can also enter the spirit realm. At that time, even if that person is peak celestial realm, I might be able to fight him. As for the person from a Lu family, he was actually looking forward to it. He was delighted. Zhongsho's face was filled with smiles. Xiaori seemed to have sensed something, pouncing on his body and sniffing around. It was satisfied and intoxicated. Zhongsho's eyes were already looking into the void. A purple gold invitation was hanging outside of the void world in the space fissure. Just now, he didn't wake up on his own accord, although today was the day of the battle. After all, there wasn't much that he could do now. He just needed to comprehend the mystery here and wait for the results. However, there were people who didn't want him to have peace. This message talisman was one. Outside of the essence room, there were a few spirit realm elders who were suppressing their anxiousness. Their faces were filled with worry. They were hesitating whether or not to alarm him. Zhongsho smiled, casually reaching out and grabbing the invitation. He grabbed it from the void. There weren't many Chinese words, just saying that Wushan Celestial Palace was having a banquet today to invite him over. At the bottom was the words, Judu, Xianting Yuanren World, Lord Han Jiuchen. Zhongsho's brow rose up, thinking to himself, what was this? The battle was about to start. Why did they want to invite him over? Were they worried that he would go against the agreement, or were they prepared to mock him? Did they really think that victory was in their hands? What kind of trick was this person trying to play? Thinking about it for a moment, Zhongsho shook his head and was prepared to smash the invitation in his hand. However, the moment he used his strength, he felt a green light rise up from within. They turned into wisps of light green threads and penetrated into his palm. This is poison. Zhongsho was startled. The chakra meridians in his body shook, and a sharp sword energy surged over with his heart. Like a hot knife through butter, it broke down the threads of green light that entered his body and removed them from his body. No, this poison isn't true poison, but gathered by spells. Even if I don't bother about it, it will dissipate on its own. That's true. Hong Jiuchen is so confident in his victory. Why would he do such an unwise thing? Then, this move is a threat? Samurai's eyes constricted. The person who attacked was indeed late Celestial Realm, maybe even peak Celestial Realm strength. Interesting, he actually used poison as his Dao. He was actually able to reach Celestial Realm. The meaning of the message was to inform Zhongshou. It was okay if he didn't come, he just needed to know. Within this Yuanren world, there were people who could restrict Zhongshou. It was best if they were more well-behaved and kept their promise. Zhongshou laughed. He wasn't willing to go to this banquet. He would allow them to be gleeful for a moment. He really wasn't willing to bother about such small things. However, at this moment, he was a little interested. Someone had already bullied him. If he didn't react, wouldn't people laugh at Zhongshou for being timid? With a flash, Zhongshou was outside the door. Looking at the stunned people here, Zhongshou retracted his gaze. I have already planned for today's battle. Zhuang Yu's ability to use troops is no weaker than Zhong Yuan and Ren Tianxing, so there's no need to worry. All you need to do is defend the Yuanjing Palace. If any cultivators attack, you will be killed. If anyone dares attack, they won't be able to return. His lips curled up. The outer region cultivators all looked down on us. They said that our cloud world was peaceful for 10,000 years and that we weren't good at fighting. However, the various sects of the cloud world fought. Which of the people here hasn't been through storms? The cloud world's spiritual wave is low, but we were able to overcome all obstacles and walk to such a stage. Why would we fear these people? All of you are the elites of the three sections. In the past, it wasn't a problem for you to fight one against three people of the same grade. Today, even if they come out in full force, what do we have to fear? Just those few words caused the expressions of the people here to calm down, smiles appearing on their faces. The few of them weren't afraid of fighting, they were just worried about the army in front of them. This wasn't something they could control. Zhongshou didn't bother and flew into the air. He headed towards the east, traveling through the air. Wushan Celestial Palace? Let's see what surprises Zhongshou would bring to this celestial feast. Chapter 844. Hong Jiuchen's Wushan Celestial Palace wasn't within the cloud world. Instead, it opened up a space in the void. Naturally, it wasn't like the vast habitat of the cloud world, but it was still really magical. Zhongshou used just 6 hours to stand in front of the Celestial Palace. Looking around, he saw that this place was heavily restricted. Zhongshou didn't forcefully charge in. Instead, he stopped outside the palace gates. So that is the case, it is a space magical treasure. No wonder it can open up space like it is a small world. This Hong Jiuchen is really lucky to be able to obtain such a treasure. Even he was extremely envious of this item. Not only could this place be compared to a huge heaven and earth bag, but it could also open up a sealed space at any time. If the restrictions of the formation were a little tighter, even Saint Realm experts wouldn't be able to see what was going on within. Within the depths of the palace, there were a few spiritual senses that reached in. They weren't shocked by Zhongshou's arrival. In just a short moment, a bunch of celestial children and maids came out to lead Zhongshou in. In just a moment, they arrived in a huge hall. It was a jade palace, beautiful and beautiful. However, within this 1,000-feet hall, apart from some celestial children serving wine, there were only a few people. Hong Jiuchen and Tianjing were seated. The others like Mu Feng and Fu Yue were also present. They were the few people he met when he first arrived in the Yuanren world. Looking at Zhongshou enter, Mu Feng and Tianjing's expressions were slightly weird. Hong Jiuchen laughed. I thought that ruler didn't have time to come today. You should be preparing to pack up and leave the Yuanren world. I really didn't expect ruler to give me such face. I am really delighted. Please sit. At this moment, the few of them had seats within the hall. It seemed like they really didn't expect that Zhongshou would come. Only the last jade table at the end of the hall was empty. Zhongshou didn't bother about him. Instead, he looked with interest at the other person sitting beside Hong Jiuchen. It was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His face was dry and thin, like a skeleton. He didn't know what race he was from, but he was slightly shorter than normal people. At this moment, he just sat there openly. Even when Zhongsho walked in, he didn't get up to greet him. He only glanced at them indifferently before ignoring them with an arrogant expression. Zhongsho chuckled to himself, thinking that this person was indeed an eccentric. He had actually managed to reach the peak of the immortal realm by using the law of poison, a low-tier law, to the extreme. He must have used some kind of secret technique to achieve his current cultivation. The price he had to pay was not small. This person was like a poisonous man from head to toe, and he could not be touched. Moreover, out of the five senses, color and taste had already disappeared. Shaking his head inwardly, Zhongsho became more wary of this person and was no longer interested in him. He was wary because this person's grasp of poison had reached the peak. Often, one would unknowingly fall for his tricks. He wasn't interested because he just needed to be careful. Such a person who relied on secret techniques to reach such a realm wouldn't be his match. If he thought that he could suppress him with this person here, then what a joke. Are all of you gathered here to discuss the Tao, or to wait for the results of the battle today? After asking this, Zhongsho turned around and smiled towards Mufang. Brother Mu, don't forget about the agreement. Mufang's expression changed slightly as he stared over viciously. Hong Jiuchen scoffed coldly. Brother Mu has already told me what the two of you said that day. If you want to sow discord, then you have made a mistake. Is that so? Zhongsho burst out laughing and looked towards Tanjing, only to see this person turn his head away awkwardly. Brother Hong has already won, so why does ruler need to do such useless things? Although we had an agreement, with the current situation, I am afraid that ruler doesn't have the ability to fulfill it. Zhongsho nodded slightly and understood. His impression of this Tianfang guild had fallen to the bottom of the valley, totally kicked out of the cooperation area. They didn't know what to do. They also didn't have a bottom line to stick to. They were blind. In the future, if they raised troops from the cloud world and truly started to conquer the various worlds, then this celestial order would be the first to be wiped out. If he left such a power behind him, he would feel like there was a blade at his back. Who knows when he would betray him? However, it was okay. What he said that day was just to test him. It wasn't surprising that this person was like that. Just as Tanjing finished speaking, another person beside him snickered and said, "This is the first time in 1,000 years that I've seen someone as stupid as you." Deacon Tan and Hong Jiuchen had been enemies several times in the past few years. Actually, they have colluded in the dark, and they really want to wear the same pants. If Judu Xianing can occupy the Yuanren world, then Tianfang Guild will take 70% of the trading rights. Only you would be so dumb to believe him. That person shook his head. You're an end-realm personal disciple, so what if you don't follow the rules once or twice? What's the big deal about killing these two people? Would Tianfang Guild dare to make a sound? Even if the 9 capital celestials stop, they still need to bear with it. You killed Jiujing. So did the League of the Seven do anything? Now, they can't. How amusing. Hong Jiuchen held the jade cup in his hand and didn't say a word. Tanjing laughed coldly and wasn't willing to bother. Anyways, since the matter was already settled, then they could say whatever they wanted. When Zhongsho heard this, he couldn't help but nod his head. That day when he agreed, he had also investigated it. This Tanjing ruled an area in the Yuanren world and had a good relationship with the various powers. Because of him, the few powers in the Yuanren world were able to maintain a balance. They even sent troops several times to help Jiujing. From the looks of it, these actions were all for the sake of bargaining. With Zhongsho's arrival, the balance in the Yuanren world was broken. Naturally, the two of them walked together. At that time, he didn't expect that Tanjing and Hong Jiuchen had colluded long ago. If he really didn't want all of this, then a month ago, he could have killed everyone here with one sword. However, there was another reason why he agreed. Moreover, if he really did that, what benefits would it bring to Zhongsho? To make enemies on all sides? The League of the Seven might worry about Long Ying. However, if the few powers worked together, then they might not have to fear him. If he really did that, then in the future, it would be tough for him to do anything in the outer region. To take down this Yuanren world, he had to cut off all future problems and make them fully convinced. He recognized that this person was Fuyue. Zhongsho smiled and walked towards a table at the end of the hall. Along with him sitting down, celestial music rose up from below the hall. There were also dozens of beautiful women who were singing and dancing below the stage. They actually cultivated some charm techniques. Their looks were also decent, and they looked really pleasing to the eye. However, no one in the hall was paying attention to the singing and dancing. They were all quietly drinking wine with different expressions on their faces. Chapter 845. At this moment, the atmosphere within the celestial hall was really suppressive. Everyone was silent and didn't mention the topic from before. Hong Jiuchen was pumped up, his eyes shining brightly. Tan Jing smiled and didn't speak. His face was filled with excitement. As for Fu Yue and the others, they were drinking with dark and sunken expressions. Although it was rare celestial wine, the few of them drank it in large mouthfuls, not feeling the taste at all. Within the hall, only Zhongsho was calm, sitting below with a smile that wasn't a smile as he poured wine for himself. Just like that, for a full day, no one opened their mouths to speak. As for the dancers below the stage, they had already changed a total of 3 rounds. At this moment, most of the people in the hall weren't focused. Zhongsho was also calculating the time. A battle of millions of people wasn't simple and would often drag on for a long time. Within a few months, it would be tough to decide victory or defeat. However, this time Hong Jiuchen was obviously going all out, and he also had Tan Jing's help. As for the others, no matter if they were willing or not, they had to help him. The battle for Yuanlian world was about to come to an end. They would definitely go all out in this battle. One side was struggling in a desperate situation. The other side wanted to settle everything in one go. This was why in Zhongsho's eyes, this battle would at most take 2 to 3 days to decide victory or defeat. The chance of victory or defeat would most probably appear at this point in time. His lips curled up. Zhongsho was slightly curious. What kind of methods would Zhuang Yu use to win? Suddenly, there was a loud clang within the hall. Zhongsho was jolted awake from his thoughts and then raised his eyes in shock, only to see Fu Yue suddenly toss the wine cup in his hand below the hall. The wine splattered all about, causing the dancers to be shocked and stop their actions. Their faces were ashen white as they looked above in terror. Fu Yue scoffed coldly. "All of you scram. This wine is tasteless, and the singing and dancing are so bad." Singing and dancing, making one annoyed. What kind of nonsense is this? It's really messing up people's thoughts. Hong Jiuchen's brow rose up, his eyes filled with rage. In the end, he waved his sleeves to tell the girls below to back down. Cultivator Fu Yue must be joking. It isn't that my wine isn't good, and it isn't that my dancers aren't good. It is that you are angry, right? Scoffing coldly, Hong Jiuchen's expression was arrogant. This time, if you are unhappy, you can fight with me. However, at that time, our agreement will be broken. If Fu Yu were to win, I would naturally have nothing to say. But if you lose, Saint Emperor Jijue, he won't let you off easily. Fu Yu's expression changed drastically as he held his breath. In the end, he let out a muffled groan and no longer refuted. He had nowhere to vent the anger in his chest. At this moment, he looked down at Zhongsho, who was calmly drinking wine. His tone turned dark. To think that ruler can actually sit still at such a time. The few of us can leave the Yuanren world and still have some compensation. At least we can get a small world. But monarch, in a few days, you will lose everything you have invested. Leaving the Yuanren world with nothing, even I feel pitiful for you. If I were you, I would even have thoughts of killing you. Zhongsho was speechless. How did the two of them end up implicating him? Hong Jiuchen's expression didn't change when he heard that. The skinny old man beside him stared at Zhongsho with a snake-like gaze. His eyes were filled with mocking intent, an intent suppressed over like it was a warning. Tan Jing laughed. Ruler is magnanimous. How would he be like you? Moreover, at this moment, Brother Zhong also has problems with non-smile. Brother Fu Yue, if you want to use words to provoke ruler to attack, it won't be as you wish. Brother Zhong is what Tan Jing said, right? While he spoke, he wasn't as ashamed as before as he raised his cup towards Zhongsho. Brother Zhong's magnanimity is outstanding. I am impressed. Although I lost this time, it wasn't because of the battle. Unfortunately, we can't work together. If there's a chance next time, I will join hands with Brother Zong. Zong Shou smiled and shook his head, not bothering about him at all. He left Tan Jing opposite him. No matter how good his temper was, he wasn't willing to be polite with such a person. Tan Jing didn't feel awkward. After laughing, he drank the wine in his hand. In the next moment, his eyes lit up. It seems like there is progress. He made a grabbing motion in the air, and a red bird was brought over. When it landed in Tan Jing's hands, its entire body exploded, turning into dozens of spiritual lights that danced in front of Tan Jing, forming dozens of runes. Others didn't understand. Zong Shou also didn't understand. However, this was probably a unique communication method of the Celestial Order, which could prevent people from intercepting. Song Xingdao also had similar methods. As expected, moments later, Tan Jing waved his sleeves and brushed away those runes. He smiled. What a good Gui Xian. This general under Brother Hong's command is really amazing. In just a day, he managed to sneak attack Linshu City and break through the defensive line here. Now that he is going straight in, not long later he will be able to attack the enemy from here. He seemed to feel that his words weren't appropriate. Tan Jing looked towards Zong Shou and smiled apologetically. Ruler, I am sorry. My words were inappropriate. Please forgive me. Zong Shou still didn't bother. This time he didn't do it on purpose. He was in deep thought. Linshu City? Why was it here? With Zhuang Yu's ability to use troops, how would he be so careless? Speaking of which, this name was really familiar. He might have paid attention to it not long ago. Numerous thoughts flashed across his mind. He also flipped out all the terrain and military arrangements around Linshu City. In the vicinity of this place, there was a continuous mountain range. However, Zhuang Yu really didn't arrange too many troops here. It was because they didn't have enough troops and also because of the terrain. Linshu City was at the mountain pass and the terrain was dangerous. They didn't need many generals to be able to defend. What was surprising was that Zhuang Yu's most elite close guard were actually here. For a moment, he was slightly absent-minded. He had already gained some understanding. So that was the case. Zhuang Yu really didn't disappoint him. When Hong Jiuchen heard this, there wasn't much joy on his face. Instead, he frowned. Till now, there hasn't been any news from my side. Tan Jing smiled and shook his head. It is because your beloved general is too cautious. Although I have not met him, I know a little about Gui Xian's personality. This person had a cold temperament, steady and prudent. If there isn't an outcome, he won't report it to Brother Hong. That's true. Hong Jiuchen smiled. He is just like that. Speaking of which, in the Yuanren world, he is the only general talent that can compare to Zhuang Yu. Unfortunately, Zhuang Yu is a good person. He said towards Zong Shou, Brother Zong really knows how to use people. This time we lost because we were too weak. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. The outcome of this battle is already decided. However, I want to be friends with Brother Zong. In the future, when the Yuanren world trades, Brother Zong's the Qian Celestial Dynasty and a few of you can participate and take 5% of it. Fuyue scoffed. 5%? Was this charity? Seeing that Zong Shou was still in a daze and didn't react at all, it was like he had taken a huge blow. He instantly shook his head, too lazy to reply. He waved his sleeves and was about to get up and leave. Since the matter was already settled, there was no point in staying any longer. He was too lazy to see the two of them being gleeful. Just at this moment, he heard a laugh spread out from the side. Looking out, he saw that it was Zong Shou. Could it be that this fellow was unwilling to accept his loss and had lost his mind? Could it be that he had lost his mind? Not only him, but even Hong Jiuchen and Tan Jing, as well as Mu Fong and Cha Ho, who were silent, all looked over. They were all filled with confusion, their expressions weird. Zong Shou was too lazy to bother. A purple gold talisman broke through the heavy world barriers and descended into the cloud sky world. Since Zhuang Yu didn't disappoint him, then naturally, Zong Shou wouldn't let him down. At the same time, within the Yuanren world, at the side of a narrow mountain path, Zhuang Yu stabbed his sword into the ground. His body was like a pagoda standing on a hill. At this moment, there was a 20,000-man infantry army to his right. They were all dressed in white armor, their bodies tall and muscular, their hands holding wide swords. They were all as stable as mountains, some of them silently standing there. There was no noise or unnecessary movement. It was as if they were all statues. Although there were only 20,000 of them, their aura was really majestic. Hidauran wore a purple gold robe and stood beside Zhuangyu. His eyes focused in front of him. He couldn't help but feel nervous. If they broke through here, then the great Xian country under his rule would be pierced through. At that time, the entire defensive line would collapse. Brother, he doesn't seem to be worried. How is that possible? Before I came, I was terrified. However, after knowing that things had already reached this stage half a day ago, I wasn't worried anymore. Hidauran smiled and turned around, only to see Zhuangyu open his eyes. The glow in his eyes was like lightning. Since Brother Zhuang expected it, then you must have a way to deal with it? Linshu City falling must have been within your expectations. Not really. I didn't expect it to fall so quickly. That Guishuan's ability to use troops is not bad. Unfortunately, those fellows in Linshu City weren't able to retreat in time. Zhuangyu took in a deep breath. His expression was sad. Then, brother, do you know? Why did I choose this place for the final battle? Final battle? Hidauran's eyes flashed. Based on what he knew, Zhuangyu didn't have many troops nearby. Could it be that this person had other plans? I don't know. He was really confused. Hidauran shook his head. I only know that the nearby terrain is really complicated and isn't good for a large army to expand. It also isn't suitable for cavalry. If we are not careful, our back path will be cut off, and we will be in danger of being wiped out. Back path? How do I have troops in my hands to block his back path? That Gue Xian is really careful when using troops, so he won't have such a chance. I chose this place because I don't have enough troops. Zhuangyu mocked himself, following which his gaze became as sharp as a knife. This is why I only have some chances of winning here. When two people meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win. Chapter 846. When enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win. Hidauran muttered to himself. He was deep in thought as he looked at the 20,000 troops lined up neatly at the foot of the mountain. He knew that this was Zhuangyu's personal guards, formed by elites who had killed more than 10 people. After 5 years, they started to take shape and were called the Xuandu Guards. However, what was surprising was that Zhuangyu till now hadn't used this personal army on the battlefield. That was because this person was a god when it came to using troops. Often, he didn't need to personally lead the troops. He planned out strategies and broke the enemy effortlessly. Due to his fame, when the enemy saw Zhuangyu's flag on the battlefield, they would retreat and avoid it. As a result, the people of the world only knew of the name of Zhuangyu's personal guards and didn't know of their actual battle records. Zhuangyu wanted to use this elite army to break through the enemy and win against 50 times their number. Maybe there would be a surprise today. His eyes flashed, and Hidauran suddenly smiled. Brother Zhuang's plans shouldn't be just that. I do have some methods. 5 years ago, I had already started planning. The countries in the east all have chess pieces. There are some who share the same aspiration, but there are some whose weaknesses are in my hands and are under my control. As he said this, he didn't bother about Hidauran's shocked expression. Zhuangyu looked into the sky. However, even if I want to use these chess pieces, I need them to be willing. If I can't see any hope, how can I hope that empty words can make them change sides? After he said this, Zhuangyu's eyes were filled with shock. In the sky, a few people flew over and hovered in the air. He recognized all of them. He had seen them a few times in the Yuanjing Palace and knew that they were the spirit realm cultivators who followed that person to conquer the Yuanren world. Especially the young cultivator at the front. He couldn't forget him. In his life, apart from the new ruler, this was the most outstanding young person he had seen. It was said that he was an important junior disciple of the Cloud World Kenzo sect. His position in the Yuanjing Palace was only below Zhongshou. At this moment, he bowed towards him from afar. Under the orders of the monarch, I am here to help the commander-in-chief. The ruler had ordered that everything here would be managed by the commander-in-chief. We won't allow the cultivators of the nine-capital celestial dynasty to interfere. Just as they were talking, a 40-year-old cultivator suddenly took out an item and threw it down. It was a huge golden ring. The ring's shadow rotated and dense spiritual light shone, following which rows of elite soldiers walked out from within the light. First, it was the 5,000 red-armored swordsmen, followed by the 5,000 crossbowmen. They were also clad in red armor, but they were slightly thinner. Then, there were 2,000 cavalry troops. They were all dressed in red armor, bright red like blood. The Qian Shang-Chi, as expected. What shocked Zhong Shouxin was that this cavalry army was grade 6. The cavalry armor was clearly specially made as well. The 2,000 cavalry looked as though they were one, and their chi was like a tide. The infantry troops were also not ordinary, standing there like a firm wall. Tai Chi explained, "This is a treasure of our Kenzo sect, the Space Hiding Ring. Unfortunately, this item can only bring 10,000 troops. However, the elites of the ruler are all here. 5,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers, 5,000 Big Dipper crossbowmen, 2,000 Black Fox iron cavalry. They're all famous in the cloud world. This time, the commander-in-chief will be in charge." Zhuang Yu's eyes lit up and then dimmed down. It seemed like the ruler already knew about his plans. The ruler is wise. These words were spoken with sincerity. One could also see that these 12,000 people were the most elite forces in Zhongshu's hands. Investing here was both because they trusted him and also because they had high hopes for his strategy. Following which, his eyes squinted as he looked into the distance. They are here. Even from a few dozen kilometers away, one could hear the rumbling sounds of the explosion. Millions of horse hooves stomped on the ground, causing the mountains to shake. Zhuang Yu's lips curled up, and he gave out a mocking smile. As expected, to enter the core of Xian country from Linshu City, one had to use light cavalry. The faster the better. As long as they could rush over before the 7 countries in the southwest reacted, they would be able to break through this pass. Only then could they truly enter the core and take control of the situation. Even the usually calm and careful Gue Xian finally made a mistake in front of such temptation. If one traveled too far, the troops would be tired and they wouldn't be able to last long. This was also one of the chances of victory. Laughing out loud, Zhuang Yu held his sword and walked down from the hill, taking large strides to the front of the army formation. Standing in the first row, the sword in his hand was still stabbed in front of his body. To be sharp and go up against an army dozens of times their size, he naturally couldn't fall behind. As a general, he had to cherish his life and try his best to protect himself. Sometimes, one had to be courageous and fight for the lead. "Men, you have followed me for 5 years. You have sharp swords, but you can't drink blood. Although you have ambition, you can only bear with it. During these years, have you felt wronged? Today, the ruler is benevolent and allows our Yuanren people to have a chance to escape from the sea of bitterness. Today, are all of you willing to fight to the death with me to break the enemy? Let our Xuandu guards be famous in the world." Those 20,000 Xuandu guards didn't speak. With a loud honk, they all pulled out their broadswords and pointed forwards in an orderly manner. Their refined armor gave out a series of clanging sounds. Along with runes appearing on their bodies, they finally broke open. A sharp and unparalleled aura suddenly charged into the sky. At this moment, in the sky, Feng Taiji was also shocked by this overwhelming aura. He looked down with some astonishment. It's actually a sealing technique? No one is below grade 5. What a good Zhuang Yu. His expression changed, and then a bitter smile appeared on Feng Taiji's face. So he had such a trump card. This person is really interesting. No wonder Zhongshu is so relaxed. He sighed in his heart. In the end, he still wasn't as good as that person. Even if he knew about this person's talent, he would still be wary. However, Zhongshu could totally let go and allow this person to do whatever he wanted. As expected, this Zhuang Yu didn't let him down. The battle today had a lot of potential. Following which he looked into the distance. only to see a huge cavalry army surging over like a river, like an iron current. However, at this moment, Tai Chi wasn't worried at all. He wondered where that person was at this moment, and what was he doing? At such an important moment, he was nowhere to be seen. Was the ruler really not worried about the war matters here at all? Just as he was thinking about this, the vast iron stream in the distance finally arrived at the mountain pass. 30,000 feet away, they all reined in their horses and stopped. The eyes of the cavalry at the front were filled with surprise. Zhuang Yu didn't wait for the cavalry to attack, holding his sword and charging down. A full 20,000 Xuandu guards stepped in an orderly manner and followed behind. In just a few dozen breaths of time, snow-white sword lights lit up in the valley. Amidst the heaven-shaking killing shouts, numerous blood glows rose up. Chapter 847. At this moment, within Wushan's celestial palace, Zhongsho's laughter had stopped. Everyone looked at him with weird gazes, but he didn't explain anything. He closed his eyes and sat down, entering a meditative state and not bothering about the people around him. Fuyue's eyes turned around, and then he broke into a laugh. He actually turned around and returned to his original seat. Although he didn't know why Zhongsho was laughing, he knew that there might be a chance for things to turn for the better. As for Hong Jiuchen and Tan Jing, their expressions were filled with shock and bewilderment. In the end, the former laughed coldly, trying to be mysterious. Since Linshu City was already broken, then what was there to worry about? The worry on his face disappeared as he closed his eyes and didn't say a word. Tan Jing's eyes flashed. A mocking intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. He didn't say anything either. The celestial palace instantly became silent once more. However, it was extremely short, just 4 hours later. Outside of Wushan's celestial palace, a spiritual light suddenly charged in. It was a celestial realm cultivator who seemed to be in a rush. With just a flash, he was in the hall. Looking at the people here, his expression was really ugly as he frowned. He hesitated slightly and then spoke to the people above. However, he used a secret incantation such that no one could hear what he said. Who knows what he said, but Hong Jiuchen also frowned. Tan Jing didn't understand. However, shortly after, a fire-red spiritual sparrow flew over from the void. In just a moment, Tan Jing's eyes were filled with darkness. Fuyue and the others found it weird, but they knew that things had definitely changed. What is going on? Why are you being so mysterious? Why do the two of you not dare to speak about it? Fuyue scoffed and mocked. Don't the few of you have numerous eyes and ears here and are well informed? How long can you hide it for? Hong Jiuchen's face was green, his muscles tensed up. Just as he was about to speak, Mu Fong had already grabbed a silver crane from the void. After closing his eyes for a moment, he looked towards Zhongsho with a weird expression. Cultivator Fuyue doesn't need to ask anymore. 2 hours ago, Zhuang Yu personally led 30,000 infantry to intercept the enemy in Qingjian Canyon. He fought with Guishuan's 600,000 iron cavalry for 4 hours. He advanced 10 miles and killed 70,000 of them. Zhuang Yu actually personally went to battle and killed 3 of Brother Hong's spirit realm cultivators. His troops are unstoppable, and he is in the midst of the battle. Fuyue was startled, following which he reacted, "Isn't Qingjian Canyon behind Linshu City?" In other words, Zhuang Yu was prepared. Wasn't this person only rank 7? His military strength was 20 times weaker than Gue Xian's. How is it possible to kill a spirit realm expert? Before he could finish his sentence, Fu Yu's expression changed. A dark light suddenly flew into his hand from afar. After a while, his expression became strange. Then he laughed and said, "Zhuang Yu, what a good man. He really hit it well. A native of Yuanlian world was actually peak spirit realm. He even personally raised up a strong army, the Xuandu Guards. Since that Zhu didn't die under Cultivator's own sword, he will fall to this person." He continued, "What a good plan. Qingjian Canyon is such a place where one can only send out 10,000 people. The terrain is uneven and isn't good for cavalry to charge." He first pretended to be weak to lure Su Chang'in. Then, he used elites to shock the enemy and head on. How amazing! However, who knows what the outcome of this battle will be? Will this Zhuang Yu defeat your 9-capital celestial dynasty? Or was it your general Gui Xian who turned the tide in the end? While he spoke, he looked towards Zhong Shou. A weird look flashed across his eyes. There was admiration, but there was also vigilance and vigilance. Hong Jiuqin scoffed to show his unhappiness. However, his expression was still calm. The battle at Qingjian Gorge. Although Gui Xian suffered a setback, it wasn't to an unmanageable level. As long as he was careful, it wouldn't affect the big picture. However, the atmosphere in the hall was becoming more and more suppressive and weird. Zhong Shou was still sitting with his eyes closed. Fu Yue smiled, and Mu Fong was startled. They were all waiting for the situation to change. They didn't have to wait for long, just 2 hours. Another ray of dim light appeared in the void. This time, Fu Yue's news was faster. That light directly landed in his hand. His brows rose up, and he laughed once more. Gui Xian has fallen at Qingjian Canyon. 600,000 cavalry for battles and 4 defeats. They have scattered and trampled on one another. Half of them are dead. Gui Xuan's 30,000 troops have advanced 30 miles and killed 200,000. With 2,000 cavalry as the vanguard, they are invincible. However, his words were interrupted by a soft Everyone looked over, only to see that Hong Jiuqin had crushed the wine cup in his hand into pieces. Fu Yue smiled and didn't care at all. He looked towards Zhong Shou and continued, "That grade 6 cavalry is under ruler, right? How amazing!" Zhong Shou didn't reply. Fu Yue felt a little awkward, but he didn't care. Instead, he smiled and drank in a carefree manner. The collapse of the Gui Xian army in Qingjian Canyon meant that the situation in Yuanren world had changed. Hong Jiuqin and Tan Jing working together might not be able to suppress everyone. At this moment, the people all had letters that spread over. When they learned that the news was true, their expressions were a little weird. Hong Jiuqin's eyes flashed like he was thinking about something. Then, he exchanged glances with Tan Jing and stood up. The banquet has lasted for more than a day, and it is time for everyone to leave. Hong Jiuqin sends all of you off. Why do you need to do this? A cold voice rang out from the lower end of the hall. Brother Hong, didn't you invite us here to watch the outcome of this battle? In case you and I do something in the dark. Now that things aren't going well, you want to end the banquet. Aren't you a little too narrow-minded? Cha, am not one of your subordinates that you can order me to come and go as you please. His voice was firm and filled with an undeniable intent. Zhong Shou opened his eyes for the first time and looked towards the source of the voice. This person was sitting opposite him. It was a male who was as beautiful as a flower, unbelievably handsome. They all said that the men of the fox race were charming, but this Azura race person was even more gentle and beautiful than the fox race. However, the fox race mostly had natural illusionary techniques which would cause people to have a good impression of them when they met. The person in front of him was filled with vengeful energy, his gaze sharp and sharp. Those who were slightly weaker would probably be scared witless in front of him. This person was Chaho Hu. Within the hall, apart from Zhong Shou, the other person was the weakest. This person's cultivation was the lowest, only at the initial immortal step realm. However, no one in the hall dared to underestimate him. Even Hong Jiuqin couldn't. His face changed for a moment before he sat down once more. In the next few hours, news from Yuanren's world seemed to explode, spreading over like snowflakes. Gui Xian is under Jianshan and obtained 200,000 infantry as reinforcements, reorganizing the army and dismounting to fight. Using life force to be Zhuang Yu's sharp vanguard. This place is wide and can send 70,000 troops. Zhuang Yu used 5,000 red crossbowmen to shoot at the dense formation from 30,000 feet away. Where the arrows landed, they either died or were injured. In 10 volleys, more than 30,000 people were killed or injured. Gui Xian was helpless and led the troops to counterattack. Zhuang Yu took the chance to use the cavalry to charge. The Xuandu guards and the 5,000 red infantry followed closely behind. The 5,000 crossbowmen cut off the enemy formation and Kuei Xin suffered a huge defeat, losing 70% of the 400,000 infantry and cavalry. Linshu City is broken and returned to the hands of Xin country. Kuei Xin fled in panic. Hong Jiuchen clenched his fists tightly, his joints giving out cracking sounds. Linshu City returned to Great Xian. Then, after a few days of war, it returned to how it was a few days ago. The 7 countries of the southwest still didn't take a single step back. On the other hand, the forces in his hands had already suffered heavy losses. Kuei Xian's subordinates also had his elite Dao soldiers as reinforcements, numbering 30,000. However, in this battle at Qingjian Canyon, under the charge of Zhuang Yu's 30,000 infantry and cavalry, 40% of them were lost. It was a heart-piercing pain that was unbearable. Now that the war had reached such a stage, it was close to impossible to wipe out the 7 countries of the southwest in one fell swoop. It seemed like they could only end the current situation in a decent manner. He couldn't help but look with a venomous gaze at the teen who was sitting quietly and not speaking. This cloud world at Qian should have been a rootless duckweed in the Yuanren world. He thought that as long as he made this person promise to follow the rules of the outer region, he would be able to easily chase him away. However, today, this person had gained a firm footing. Zhongshu didn't bother about this person's gaze. Instead, he looked closely at the message talismans that came from afar. Ruoshui followed his instructions and recorded Zhuang Yu's arrangement of troops in every battle, as well as all the dispatching methods and adaptations in battle. Everything was recorded in detail in these talismans. This was while though Zhongshu wasn't personally on the battlefield, he was able to personally witness those few battles. Ambitious and ruthless person, the talent of a general. Looking at his troops' commanding skills, he was only a little weaker than Ren Tianxing and Zhong Yuan, but there wasn't any difference in quality. Going against the two of them, the chances of victory would be 4 to 6. As for the overall situation, the command of troops between Ren Tianxing and Zhong Yuan, he was only weaker than Kong Yao. He was a rare all-rounder talent. He could be used in a corner and also be able to take charge of an area. He really couldn't give this person the slightest chance to make him a good minister in governing the world. Zhongshu couldn't help but have a headache. It was really tough to control such a person. Shaking his head, Zhongshu tossed this headache to the side. Following this, he raised his head and smiled as he looked at Mufang. Brother Mu, I wonder what you've thought about it. Do you remember what we said that day? This chance is hard to come by. If you miss it, you might have such a chance in the future. The moment these words were said, the expressions of everyone in the hall changed. Hong Jiuchen and Tan Jing's gazes were like knives as they stared right at Mufang. Did this person really collude with Zhongshu? Mufang was annoyed. He was angry at Zhongshu for what he said. He was also annoyed at the gazes of the few people above. Just as he was in deep thought, outside of Wushan Celestial Palace, another streak of light descended. It was yet another immortal realm cultivator from the Azura clan. After bowing towards Xiahou Hu, he expressionlessly looked at the people in the hall. An hour ago, the king of the East Sea of the nation raised his flag and declared his independence. He wants to return to the Qin dynasty. Chapter 848. An hour ago, the Donghai king of the country raised his flag to become an independent country, wanting to return to the Qin rule. The hall was silent once more. Everyone was stunned. Fuyue and Mufang both sucked in a deep cold breath. Yi country was the biggest country under his rule, occupying half of the mid-plains. Hong Jiuchen gave it many countries to reduce its strength. The Donghai king was one of the 6 strong vassals. The land he ruled was close to the East Ocean, using salt and iron as an advantage. He had 600,000 troops. However, it was tens of thousands of miles southwest, so who knew what the Donghai king was thinking? Even if he joined Zhongshu's Qin Celestial Dynasty, he wouldn't be able to help. However, if this country really wanted to become independent, it would be a heavy blow to Hong Jiuchen's heart. All of a sudden, everyone present looked towards Zhongshu, trying to see something from his face. However, They all returned in disappointment. They only felt that although this person was young, he was really shrewd. He actually managed to make one of Hong Jiochen's pillars betray him without making a sound. No wonder he was so confident when he came. Tan and Hong's faces turned green and white and then green. The latter squinted his eyes, following which he laughed instead of being angry. This is the ruler's method? As expected, it is really sharp. However, this small problem can't go against the big picture. That Donghai brat really doesn't know what he is talking about. However, it is okay. I can destroy him with a flick of my finger. Is that so? Zhongsho laughed. His mind was spinning on a message talisman. He was also surprised that the Donghai king of Yi country decided to change sides. This Xuan Yu really gave him a huge surprise this time. His family was sent to the southwest to hide before the war. At this moment, they were already in the Yuanjing Celestial Palace. Donghai King Feng Machen. He knew that he most probably couldn't protect Donghai, but he still did that. This person probably had the intention to die. His heart was filled with complicated thoughts. In the Yuanren world, there was actually such a person who didn't care about power and position, who didn't care about fame and reputation, who was willing to die. Regardless of his ability, just his character was much rarer than Zhuang Yu's. If there were such people in all the realms in this region, then Zhongsho wanted to conquer the outer realms. Just like the Liu family and the divine emperor of the later generations, he wanted to control thousands of worlds. Even if he spent 10,000 years of effort, it would still be difficult to achieve this. In that case, should he protect this person's life or not? Samuraim's eyes flashed, followed by a sigh. The talisman in his hand suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes. A spiritual light flew out from his sleeves. He was the first person to change sides. No matter what, he had to do his best to protect his life. Looking around, he saw Hong Jiochen's lips moving as if he was talking to someone. Moments later, a few streaks of light flew out of the Wushan Immortal Palace. From afar, he could sense that they were all above the spirit realm. Zhongsho instantly shook his head. This should be the last bit of strength in Hong Jiochen's hands. During the battles at Qingjian Canyon and Jianshan Mountain, just the spirit realm people who died in Zhuang Yu's hands reached 5. Tai Chi also had some small gains under his sword. Who knows if Ruo Shui would be able to handle it? Then he mocked himself. Ruo Shui's comprehension wasn't bad. It was just that her talents were slightly weaker. A few months ago, she had already passed the spirit realm tribulation. 20% of spirit and martial arts merger was something normal cultivators couldn't do anything about. Once those few spirit realm experts left the Wushan Immortal Palace, Hong Jiochen sat silently on the golden chair and didn't speak anymore. One could only see the twitching muscles on his face and the vicious intent flashing in his eyes. One could see that his mental state was actually really intense. Tan Jing's eyes flashed, who knew what he was thinking about. A moment later, he suddenly spoke up and broke the silence in the hall. Ruler, now that the battle had reached this stage, everything was clear. At most, it will be a stalemate, neither side able to do anything. Why don't the three of us shake hands and make peace? Hong Jiochen was furious when he heard this, but then he calmed down. He still didn't say a word as he sat on the golden chair. Zhongsho laughed. Only now did he know how to ask for peace. This Tan Jing was really interesting. At the start, he called him ruler, country ruler. Then he changed to brother Zhong, cultivator Zhong. At this moment, he changed back to his original form of address. Did he really think that Zhongsho was someone who didn't have any temper at all, someone who could be molded as he wished? Just as he shook his head and didn't speak, Fuyue's expression changed slightly. Another light charged in from outside the hall. During these dozens of hours, pretty much every minute and a half, there would be new news spread out from within the Yuanren world. However, most of them were repetitive or had no effect on the big picture, so no one cared. Moments later, Fuyue laughed out maniacally. Chilua country general Shuang has betrayed. 300,000 troops have changed sides. He has sent 100,000 elite cavalry to attack Ghost Path City. Brother Hong, you're one. 7 million troops on the south line. They're about to collapse, right? Their grain path is cut off and their back path is blocked. With Zhuang Yu's ability to use troops, how would he let go of such a chance? No, he did on purpose. If the south line collapses, the other places won't be able to hold on for long. Half a month ago, you colluded with Xianxin to force me to give up on the Yuanren world. Did you think that such a day would come? As he said this, Fu Yue saw Hong Jiuqin's red eyes stare over. However, he didn't show any fear as he scoffed coldly. Can other people talk about what you have done? Zhong Shou listened quietly at the side. Actually, he had known about this news a moment ago. After all, Zhuang Yu was the one who planned this, which was why he was a step ahead of the others. As for the Xianshan that Fu Yue mentioned, he didn't know who he was. He could only guess from his words that he should be one of the subordinates of Jiju at Holy Land. He had jurisdiction over this Fu Yue. He had long seen through it, whether it was Mu Fong or Fu Yue. They were both unwilling to leave the cloud world. Shaking his head, Zhong Shou stared intently at Mu Fong once more. What do you think? This is the last time. If you miss this chance, then there won't be a future. Even if I take a risk and occupy the entire Central Plains, I might be able to defend it. At that time, in just 10 years, Brother Mu will have nothing in this Yuanren world. He smiled. If you're worried about the Hanling order, then why don't you ask Brother Hong? Are you willing to use a small-sized world to exchange with me? Hong Jiuqin's face was ashen white, his lips open like he wanted to speak, but he couldn't. If they could occupy this Yuanren world, the 9 capital celestial dynasty would naturally be willing to use a small-sized world to exchange. However, the situation was at such a stage. There was no way to talk about the trade before this. Mufang thought about it for a moment before he stopped hesitating. If I help ruler, then what benefits will I get? Tianfang Guild land will belong to Brother Mu. Zhong Shou said expressionlessly. He wanted to kick Tianjing out. Chapter 849. The land of Tianfang Guild will belong to Brother Mu. Zhong Shou said expressionlessly. He wanted to kick Tianjing out. Mufang's eyes lit up. Tianfang Guild ruled the southeast side, but was close to the ocean. Although the region was small, it was a really prosperous land. It was really rich and could raise millions of troops. Tianjing was startled, fresh blood seeping out from his lips. He knew that Hong Jiuqin had already lost and had no strength left to protect him. Once the two of them decided, there would be no place for him in this Yuanren world. He panicked. The foundations of the Yuanren world didn't belong to him alone. It was the hard work of the entire Tianfang Guild. If because of him, all their efforts went to waste and they were chased out of the celestial world, one could imagine what would happen to him. Although he might not lose his life, the celestial order would definitely punish him. Spiritual medicine, spiritual land, techniques, all sorts of resources would be cut off, and he would be no different from a factionless cultivator. His aptitude wasn't good to begin with. As such, the possibility of him improving further was as good as severed. This was the first time he felt that his decision to work with Hong Jiuqin was a little too rash. To be able to become the overlord of the southeast from a weak country in the cloud world, and even force back a giant like the Taoist faction. Such a person was really extraordinary. However, at this moment, what was the use of regretting? Looking at the situation Zhong Shou was in, it was obvious that he had no intention of speaking to him. Before this, he threatened and lied to him, wanted to work together to chase him out of the Yuanren world. For him to do the opposite was expected, and there was nothing he could blame him for. Then, the only one he could fight for was Mufang. Taking in a deep breath, Tianjing tried to calm himself down. Brother Mu, you already know the ability of this ruler. Even when Brother Hong and I worked together, we still ended up in such a bad state. To chase Tianjing and Tianfang Guild out of the Yuanren world, with just the two of you, can you block this person? When Zhong Shou heard this, he smiled and didn't speak. For someone as smart as Mu Fong, there was no need for him to say anything more. That Mu Fong didn't think much, replying emotionally. If you add in the 3 provinces of Qi Luo, Mu Fong is willing to help the ruler. Even if they join forces, they would not be able to do anything to Zhong Shou. Although he and Fu Yue were just playing on the side in this battle. Due to the reluctance in his heart, he did not truly go all out. However, now that Hong Jiuchen was showing signs of being defeated, even if they joined forces, they might not be able to do anything to Zhong Shou. The odds of victory between the two sides were only 70 to 30. Naturally, it would be good if they won. They would chase Zhong Shou out of the cloud world, but they still had to fight with these people. If he lost, he would have nothing left. Therefore, it was better to take over the entire southeastern region. Just as Zhong Shou had said, only by having more power in their hands could they gain the support of the Hanling order. Rather than those rich lands being in Tanjing's hands, why not have them in their own hands? What was the point of having a wavering ally with bad intentions? Problems in their hearts were like thorns in their backs. Only after they went over could they go all out against the enemy. Okay. Zhong Shou smiled. Mufang was willing to help him. In that case, the outcome of today's battle was more or less settled. Tanjing was stunned when he heard that. The blood drained from his face. Hong Jiuchen's hands trembled. His entire body was trembling. Their last bit of hope could only be placed on Fu Yue. Today, they didn't hope to win. They just hoped that they wouldn't be chased out. However, with this person's personality, what he said before might not be what they wished for. Ruler's methods really make one cooperate with you. Amazing, really amazing. Fu Yue laughed out loud, his expression turning serious as he said solemnly, "If I want to send troops to add flowers to the brocade, is ruler willing to use Brother Hong's land to repay me?" Zhong Shou's eyes squinted as he looked at this person. Then, he nodded his head. "Our two sides will use Luo Shui as the border. You will take the north of Luo Shui, I will take the south." He expressionlessly looked at Chaho, who, "Brother Cha and I are neighbors and have 23 provinces. I want to use the entire Yi country to exchange with you. Is Brother Cha willing?" This was a plan to protect Donghai King Fomwatchen. After the exchange, he would be able to protect him. Who knows why, but out of the numerous celestial realm experts in the hall, only this one made him feel threatened. He always felt that this person wasn't simple. Moving to the East Ocean was temporarily not connected to him, so it would be a headache for Mufang and Fu Yue. Chaho, who smiled and didn't say anything. He only raised his wine cup towards Zhong Shou and then drank it all in one gulp. In just a few words, the few of them split up the entire Yuanren world. He didn't care at all. Tanjing and Hong Jiuchen were listening from the side. Domain battles were cruel to begin with. When Tan and Hong worked together to chase them out, they didn't show any courtesy to them. Even the emaciated old man had stopped eating. His eyes were dark as he swept the hall. In the end, he suddenly scoffed and shook the entire hall. It caused Mufang and the others to feel dizzy and unable to say anything. Only then did Hong Jiuchen regain some life and bow towards the old man. "Old poison, did you say that you were willing to teach us?" The skinny old man looked at him and didn't reply, only laughing coldly. "Useless thing." His voice was still like a drum, piercing one's eardrums. Then he faced everyone. "My 9 capital, Celestial Dynasty, will definitely take down the Yuanren world. This is an order from our Saint Emperor, and we can't go against it." Zhong Shou smiled when he heard this and touched his lips with the cup. Saint Emperor's orders couldn't be disobeyed? Then what about it? He saw threads of green mist spreading within the hall. It caused the expressions of everyone present to turn serious, and they all showed wary expressions. This is why I asked the few of you to think about it carefully. The skinny old man's eyes were half closed as he said. His tone was filled with a tone that didn't allow them to reject him. "Before this, my Judu Shinting's promise to the two of you is still valid. Those 2 small worlds still won't change." Mufang frowned when he heard this. The promise still won't change? If it was before, naturally he could only agree. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only do so. However, now, time had changed and the situation was totally different from dozens of days ago. A small world that was only 4,000 miles of land wasn't fully owned by him. So how could he be willing? If he swallowed Tanjing's land, he would only gain more today. Fu Yue directly mocked. Your judo Xianing is really generous. Your calculations are really good. Unfortunately, I really don't care about it. You don't have a choice. The skinny old man smiled and didn't care at all. Cultivator Fuyue, do you believe that I can make sure that you can't walk out of this place today? Or on a certain day, you will die for no reason and no one will be able to find a reason? Fuyue was startled, and then he was furious. He clenched his fists tightly. You dare? Why wouldn't you dare? Old Poison shook his head. Cultivator Fuyue, do you expect Xianshun to stand up for you? As for Jiju as Saint Emperor, he probably doesn't have time to worry about this matter. My 9 capital celestial dynasty is just paying a price to buy a celestial realm life. What does Cultivator Fuyue think? Just a casual sentence caused Fuyue to hold his breath. Even Mufang's eyes flashed, and he started to hesitate. Zhongshou listened quietly. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Can't walk out of this Wuxian celestial palace? He died without a sound or trace, without any reason. The moment Zhong Shoxin thought about it, the nameless sword stopped at his sleeves. The sword intent was hidden in his body and was about to explode out. If I didn't hear it wrongly, your words seem to be a threat? Cultivator, are you going to directly interfere in this Yuanren world battle? When the skinny old man heard this, he looked at Zhongshou with interest. It isn't a threat, just a warning. However, so what? What can ruler do to me? Asking him a question, the old man shook his head and laughed. Today, I will teach ruler to be good. There are rules in this outer region conquest, but we need to be flexible. For example, our Judu Xianing wants to take down this Yuanren world. Even if we break the rules, we don't care. If this Hanling Order and Jiju Celestial Dynasty are unhappy, they can take revenge and fight with us. However, if they aren't willing to start a war, we can just negotiate and take out more things to compensate. Fellow Taoist Mu, I wonder if this old man is wrong? Mufang didn't say anything, but his expression was really ugly. When a skinny old man saw this, he laughed coldly like he had expected this. He then said, if ruler is unhappy, you can invite someone over to reason with me. But today you have to do as I say. Why don't we follow Tan Jing's intentions and let's shake hands and make peace? Before he could finish speaking, he heard a faint voice coming from the bottom of the hall. Invite someone over to reason with you? There is no need. A waterfall-like sword light suddenly filled the room. A cold shadow flashed, and a resplendent blood-red light appeared, causing everyone to involuntarily feel the urge to retreat. The green mist that filled the hall was also swept away by the red shadow that swept all around. They didn't feel the sharpness of the sword light and didn't feel the sword intense oppression. The few people in the hall were all shocked and shocked. They knew that within the vast sword shadow, all the martial path intent, all the sharpness was gathered at one point and didn't leak out at all. It was massacring sword intent. The skinny old man was both shocked and furious. He didn't expect that this Zhongshou would actually dare to attack him. Then he mocked in his heart. Killing path sword technique, even if he was at the peak of the soul realm. How would he be able to deal with him? With a thought, a 7-colored mist spat out from his body. He tried to block the sword light that charged over, but he felt that it wasn't right. The sword shadow wasn't blocked by the 7 extreme poison barrier at all. It was like it broke through time and pierced in. Several stars appeared around his body, causing his internal energy and soul power to go out of control. Then, the sword shadow twisted and the head on his neck flew up into the air. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw that the skinny old man was only left with a headless body. He stood on the steps. His body had no signs of life. Chapter 850. Along with the old man's head falling to the ground, the sky full of sword light suddenly retracted back into Zhongshou's sleeves. Since Zhongshou had followed the rules of the outer region, then he wouldn't allow others to not follow the rules with him. Hong Jiuchen was still stunned at the side. A moment later, he finally realized something and sat paralyzed on his chair. At this moment, apart from shock, there was also fear. That sword was simply too quick. He didn't even see how Old Poison died. He only knew that it was a massacring sword intent, but it wasn't. It definitely wasn't just a killing path sword. How could a martial Dao sword intent at the peak of the soul realm kill old Poison, who was close to the peak of the immortal realm? Numerous questions rose up in his heart, but at this moment, he didn't have time to think about it. At this moment, Hong Jiuchen's chest was only filled with fear. Since this Zhong Shou could kill old Poison with one sword, then he could also kill him. If he wanted him to die, there was no difficulty at all. Only now did he feel regret. If he knew that this would happen, why did he have to set up this banquet within Wushan Celestial Palace? I have already killed this person. If your Judu Xianing is unhappy, then find someone to reason with me. Let's talk about it then. As Zhong Shou said that, he smiled and looked at Mu Fong and Fu Yu. Today's matter is settled like that. If the two of you have any objections and want to go back on your words, then say it. I thought about it carefully and felt that old Poison's words made sense. This Yuanren world has to follow my wishes. Mu Fong and Fu Yue's faces were ashen white. At this time, how would they dare to not know what was good for them and retort? They forced out a smile and stood up. We know. We will definitely keep our promise. That's good. Only then did Zhong Shou smile and drink the celestial wine in his hand. Then he stood up. Since that is the case, then today's banquet can end. The food here is good. The singing and dancing are good. I'm satisfied. Looking around, Zhong Shou hesitated. Should he kill Hong Jiuchen too? This Wushan Immortal Palace was really not bad. It was enviable. His eyes narrowed as the light in his eyes flickered. Zhong Shou still shook his head and walked out of the hall. He killed old Poison because he broke the rules of the outer realm. Towards Hong Jiuchen, he didn't have enough reason. What a waste. Although this person was annoying, he didn't want to give up. Moreover, at this moment, he didn't have much time. He didn't have the energy to refine this immortal palace. After exiting Wushan Immortal Palace, Zhong Shou walked on the void. However, he didn't return to the Yuanren world. Instead, he headed out of the World River. At this time, in the Yuanren realm, the situation was already decided. All that was needed was a talisman edict to divide the various countries into fiefdoms and finalize the matter of rewards based on merit. Even without him, Ruolin and the others would most likely be able to handle the remaining matters. Fu Yu and Mu Fong didn't have the courage to go back on their words. On the contrary, trouble finally arrived on his side. Traveling through the void, just as he was a few worlds away, a talisman floated up beside Zhong Shou. It burned in midair and turned into dust that scattered. This was the talisman that Shun Yuexian gave him that day. He didn't know what kind of secret technique the person who was searching for him dozens of worlds away was using. It caused this talisman that could last for a month to be used up in just a day and its spiritual energy to scatter. In that instance, the bloodline in his body surged once more, causing a layer of white flames to burn around Zhong Shou's body. Sky burning flame? Zhong Shou looked at his body, and then his eyes were filled with a weird expression. He only felt that in that short instance, his sky-burning bloodline had become much purer. Power's flames were also much stronger than before. However, he didn't know the reason. Since a few years ago when he merged with the Water Qilin Legacy Soul Seal, his body reached balance. During these years, he didn't purposely strengthen the power of his bloodline. Even the Water Qilin and Lightning Phoenix Soul Seals were placed to the side and shelved. Not only did he not study it, but he also purposely suppressed it. He didn't want the yin and yang energy in his body to be out of balance once more. However, at this moment, the Liu family sky-burning blood seemed to have evolved out of nowhere. Due to this change, the Nine-Tail Sky Fox blood and the Water Qilin and Lightning Phoenix Soul Seal all reacted. In his soul ocean, they all stretched out their bodies, adding scales and wings. Profound and mysterious runes suddenly emerged from the bottom of his heart, and then quickly settled into his memory. It caused his brain to swell up and hurt. Zhong Shaxin knew that most of these things came from these few bloodline inheritances. After this, as long as he thought back to it, he could study it. It would definitely be of great benefit to him. However, what was going on with the current situation? Clenching his fists, he felt that his strength had increased by a lot in this short moment. In the past, it was the strength of 38 mountains. Now it was 44 small summer mountains. There was even a faint water vapor that wrapped around his skin. Even in the sky burning flame, it still didn't dissipate. This was the strengthening of his body after his bloodline evolved. Is it that person? This was the only reason Zhong Shou could think of. If the reason wasn't him, then it could only be an external force. It should be the marrow burning spirit sacrifice technique. A cold voice spread out from behind him. Zhong Shou turned around in shock, only to see a handsome teen stepping in the air. Zhong Shou's brow rose up, his eyes filled with surprise. So, his brother Cha. This person was actually able to track his tracks and find his way over. Cha Hu nodded slightly and sized up Zhong Shou. Based on what I know, the sky-burning Lu family has a secret technique. Gathering at least 36 people of the same family to burn their marrow and infuse their blood spirits. It can greatly increase the purity of the bloodline. This is the first time I have seen it. When he said this, Cha Hu smiled. Legend has it that the 24 bloodlines of the Lu family are maintained by this method. In each generation, there will be 3 to 5 people who maintain their pure sky-burning bloodline. Before this, Cha Hu was still surprised that your mother had lost power in the Lu family for a long time. To think that there is still such a power to be able to use this Lu family secret technique. However, from the looks of it, the person who used the marrow-burning spirit sacrifice technique most likely harbors ill intentions. Zhong Shou kept silent. At this moment, the sky-burning bloodline in his body was close to boiling. So how could he suppress it? In just a few minutes, that person would be able to find where he was. 36 members of the Lu clan burned their marrows. Even if they didn't die, they wouldn't have much lifespan left. This person is really going all out just to kill me. This so-called marrow-burning spirit sacrifice technique really made one feel disgusted. This was also the first time he knew that the Lu family that ruled 800 worlds had such a cruel technique and such a cruel thing. Are there any hidden dangers? What's the price? Chapter 851. Any secret technique in the world that could greatly increase one's strength had to come with a price. At this moment, he didn't cultivate much, and his bloodline had greatly improved. Such strength that came out of nowhere must be accompanied by some hidden dangers and inconveniences. He had never heard of this marrow-burning spirit sacrifice technique before. At this moment, the only person he could ask for advice from was this person who had been silently chasing after him with unfathomable intentions. Price. Cha Hu smiled. Someone paid the price for you. The 36 Lu clansmen had at most 3 years to live. However, Zhong Shou thought to himself that as expected, there was still the word however at the end. He focused and listened, only to hear Cha Hu say, this technique injects blood spirit, but it needs a sealing technique to work with it. If your Lu family elders don't use this technique, the sky-burning bloodline in your body will be activated. If you can make it through, then that is good. If you can't, then your flesh and blood will burn to death. Brother Zhong, you need to be careful. It is best if you ask your Lu family Saint Realm elders to help you seal your blood spirit. If this technique doesn't work with it, it will be a true torture that will make you wish you were dead. You will know how painful it is in the future. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed tightly. Lu family Saint Realm venerables? Where's he going to find them? The only one he knew was Fanjue. However, this person was also a subordinate of the Lu family. Even if he could find them, he wasn't willing to ask for them. Scoffing coldly, Zhong Shou tossed Cha Hu's words to the side. Torture? So painful that you wish you were dead? How painful could it be? Could it be better than the dual meridian body? On the contrary, this Shura race person seemed to be really familiar with the Lu family. Thinking about it in his heart, Zhong Shou didn't show it on his face. He nodded slightly. Thank you, Brother Cha, for your guidance. I will remember it. However, I have one more question. Why did Brother Cha chase over today? Do you have something you want to discuss with me? To be able to chase behind him and not be noticed by him. This Cha whose strength wasn't as simple as what he showed. I knew that this would arouse Brother Zong's suspicion. Chaho Hu smiled, his expression indifferent. However, I am here because I have something to discuss with Brother Zong. This time, I'm looking for Brother Zong to join forces. Zong Shou was stunned. At this time, those who were still qualified to play chess on the chessboard of the Yuanren world should be thinking about how to join forces to fight against Zong Shou. Chao Hu's words were rather surprising. After pondering for a moment, Zong Shou suddenly had an idea. Is Zhuang Yu's martial arts secretly taught to him by your Azura clan? Subconsciously, he blurted out the question. If that was the case, then the 20,000 Xuandu guards probably had something to do with this person. Chaho was surprised when he heard this. However, she kept silent and didn't say anything. Her bright eyes looked at Zong Shou in a daze. A moment later, she burst out laughing. Brother Zong is really sharp to be able to guess that. That is the truth. However, I used some methods so that General Zhuang still doesn't know anything. I thought that there was someone else helping him in the dark. Zong Shou listened on quietly. Only when he stopped did he open his mouth and ask, Brother Cha's identity is probably not simple. Chaho, who doesn't seem to be your real name. What is your goal and what do you want? A celestial realm cultivator with indiscernible strength couldn't run over to the Yuanren world for no reason. Looking at his actions, he was actually helping Zhuang Yu in the dark to overthrow the alien races. At this time, he ran over to find him to join forces. All of his actions were inconceivable. Based on what he knew, the Cha surname was one of the war races in the Shura race. Although he was also handsome, he was not as beautiful as the one in front of him. Her appearance was simply unearthly. There is indeed such a person as Chaho Hu, but it isn't me. As for my goal, if I say that it is to help our Shura race solve a calamity, would Brother Zong believe me? Chao Hu's eyes flashed as he explained. Judu Xianing can't stop him, and the Hanling Order can't either. Jiju as Saint Emperor is currently going all out to defend against the Liu family. Thus, we can only place our hopes on Zhuang Yu. Our Shura race doesn't hope that he can stop that person, but we hope that he can delay for a few years. He does have the ability. The moment he said this, Zong Shou's expression changed slightly as he looked at him in shock. Stop that person? Solve a calamity? Instantly, he understood. Zong Shou's expression instantly calmed down. Now do you think that I, Zong Shou, am more suitable than Zhuang Yu? That is the case. Chao Hu nodded. I have observed Zhuang Yu for 10 years and understand him deeply. To be able to make him yield, he definitely isn't an ordinary person. During these few months, Ruler flipped his hand and caused clouds and rain. It was really exciting. He wanted to continue, but Chaho Hu's expression changed slightly, and then he smiled. It seems like Brother Zong's problem has arrived. Now that this person is anxious, he probably hates Brother Zong deeply. This person's strength isn't bad and is also peak celestial realm, but he is more than 100 times stronger than that poisonous bug. You're in trouble this time. Forget it. Let's discuss this matter in the future. I will take my leave first. He stepped in the void and said flatly, Brother Zong, don't worry. No matter whether or not you are able to safely escape from this person's pursuit. I will try my best to take care of Brother Zong's foundations in the Yuanren world. His voice lingered in the air for a long time, even after Chaho Hu left. Zong Shou frowned, thinking to himself that this person was really weird. His aura was really fierce, and the smell of blood filled his nose. It was on the same level as that day when he killed hundreds of thousands of Taoist faction cultivators. This person definitely went through the Shura battlefield and took numerous lives. Even if he was from the Shura race, his vengeful aura was a little too strong. Was it really appropriate to have this person as an ally? Forget it. He would think about this matter in the future. Zong Shou shook his head. At this time, how would he have the time to think about all this? The blood in his body boiled, and he only felt an extremely sharp and violent intent. His mind was firmly locked in place. An aura swiftly flew over from a few worlds away. I caught you. Beside his ear, he heard a snort that sounded like the roar of a wild beast. Zong Shou shook his head. With a thought, the void dharma in his heart appeared outside. 40-star dragon pellets spread out in all directions. Some were not far from him, while some were a world away. Following this, a full 28 extinction dragon tooth swords flew out from his sleeves. They flew around and formed the 10 extreme Imperial Tao Destruction Formation. Today was probably the toughest battle Zhong had faced since he started cultivating. Since he couldn't escape, he could only go all out. The moment the sword formation was set up, many spear shadows suddenly pierced through the void and landed here. It was bright and silver-white like a pear flower. Chapter 852. When the spear shadow struck, it was like a heavy hammer smashing over. It brought along the space-burning flame as it struck the front of Zhongshou's body. Zhongshou's nameless sword had just raised up a sword light when it was smashed into chaos by this huge strength. 300 Sumera Mountains, 40% spirit and martial arts merger. Zhongshou's pupils opened wide. In just a moment, he sensed the rough strength of this person. As expected, he was peak celestial realm. He was 100 times stronger than people of the same grade. This person was cultivating the great Tao of defense. He could control all things, all spirits, all spells, all 3,000 Taos. There was actually such a magical technique in this world. The moment the sword shadow in his hand dissipated, it rose up once more. A heavy sword veil rose up in front of him to block and dissolve it. However, without exception, the moment it started, it was forcefully shattered by the spear shadow. Zhongshou didn't care at all. His expression didn't change. He went all out, using the nameless sword in his hand to hold up the space in front of him. One Originine within 100 feet, it was still his unbreakable sword domain. To fight such a top expert, he didn't care about Tanxio's identity being revealed. He went all out and didn't dare to hold back at all. In the void, there was instantly a series of metal clanging sounds. The spear and sword clashed time and time again. The shockwaves started to shatter this world river. Zhongshou only felt that the sword tip on his arm was close to numb. That vast and unstoppable power continued to strike over. Luckily, it didn't injure him. Most of the power was swallowed by the black hole in Zhongshou's soul ocean when it reached his body. He then used the white hole technique to reflect it back. His technique, that was born from the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique, was indeed magical. Just the most shallow use of it could make it strong when facing the strong and weak when facing the weak. There was another loud dang. This strike seemed to have merged the thousands of spear shadows from before into one. The power of tens of thousands of mountains gathered at one point. Zhongshou's body couldn't take it anymore. It was only after retreating 3 times in a row that he managed to stop himself. The first thing he looked at was the nameless sword in his hand. His opponent was clearly using an immortal-ranked weapon. Under such a heavy blow, he couldn't help but worry. In the end, he relaxed. The blood-red long sword in his hand was still undamaged. Strangely, the sword had only drunk old poison's blood today, and it had already been half a day. But when you use the sword, the true power of the sword will increase by close to double. He felt that it was unbelievable. Did the nameless sword have a new ability? However, for today's battle, it couldn't be better. Zhongshou had no time to think about it. A pair of 5,000 feet long wings of pure black stretched out behind him. Other than the sky burning flame, there were also traces of lightning flickering within. The strengthening of the sky-burning blood also caused the power of the 1,000-blaze lightning flash to increase greatly. Not only Huiyin, but Rayleigh as well. It was the 7-star Xianing cannon that he got from Prince Jia Mingluo. Even if Zhongshou was distracted by the Book of Ian and the sword formation and didn't have time to cultivate, he still grasped 3 types of lightning. When he used it now, the aura was really strong, far from what he could compare to when he was at Heaven Realm. The Heaven Flame armor appeared one by one on his body. It was also burning with a red flame. To be able to take a spear from this person and not die meant that he had the ability to fight back. After months of tough cultivation, The situation was much better than he had expected. However, if he wanted to leave safely today, he had to use all his strength. Right in front of Zhongsho, a person stepped out from the void. He looked around 20 years old, and his face was red and healthy. There was a mysterious rune on his forehead, which made him look really devilish. However, his eyes were filled with a blood glow like they were burning as he looked over. Your sword technique is not bad. What is amusing is that my Lu family people thought that you were still a piece of trash. To be able to cultivate to such a realm with your dual meridian body, you should be proud. He held a silver spear as he slowly walked over. The teen asked him passively, "Did Lu Zi die in your hands?" "Yes." Zhongsho nodded. He definitely wouldn't deny what he had done. The moment he said this, the veins on the teen's face popped out. "With your ability, she's like an ant in front of you. Then, why couldn't you let her live?" "Why should I?" Zhongsho raised his eyes. His gaze was really calm. There were too many reasons why he wanted to kill Lu Zi. He didn't want the Lu family matter to affect his expansion into the outer region. This woman's words and actions that day also couldn't make him show mercy. She also knew many of his secrets, which was why he wanted to kill her. His original plan was to deal with these few people. He wanted to delay the trouble that the Lu family brought, although in the end, things didn't go as he wished. However, he couldn't say these words to this person and wasn't willing to say anything. Speaking of which, was there any use in explaining? This was why he calmly adjusted his breathing and replied in a concise manner. The teen seemed to be filled with rage and was unable to vent it. His eyes were as red as blood as he continued to walk over. "Then, do you know that Zir and her parents are in our Lu family death jail and need her to reduce their sentences? Do you know that she has 2 younger brothers that need to be raised? Although the 2 of you aren't close, you have the same bloodline. How can you bear to do that?" Zhongsho looked at the teen in front of him with a weird expression. What was going on with this fellow? There was such a weirdo in the Lu family? Since they were enemies, then he would just go all out and fight. So long-winded. It's not refreshing at all. Did he want to make him feel guilty by saying these words? Then, he would really disappoint him. Although I have the sky burning blood, that Lu Zi didn't show mercy when she attacked me. Zhongsho shook his head and then smiled nonchalantly. Before you said all this, did you think that those 36 Lu family disciples wouldn't be able to live after 3 years? If you want to fight, then let's fight. Why do you need to speak so much? The teen was startled and looked closely at Zhongsho. He seemed a little surprised and then scoffed. As expected, he didn't say any more nonsense. That silver spear disappeared from his hand. In the next moment, it flashed and appeared once more. It was actually 150 feet in front of Zhongsho's brow. It seemed like it only needed 300 or even 1,000th of an instant to pierce through Zhongsho's brow. Zhongsho felt a chill in his heart. This spear controlled numerous powers and could pierce through all laws in the world. In the past, when he fought, he was always able to merge with heaven and earth and borrow its strength. At this moment, it was like he was being repelled by the void. Not to mention borrowing the power of heaven and earth. Even controlling spiritual energy was tough. What a great Imperial Tao. He couldn't take this spear head-on. The moment Zhongsho had a thought, the 10 extreme Imperial Tao Destruction Sword Formation reacted. Just 24 Imperial Tao Dragon Tooth swords raised up millions of sword energy and slashed toward the person opposite him. A total of 24 Taos were contained within the sword energy. The nameless sword in Zhongsho's hand lightly slashed out. This was the first time he tried to hide the Tao word, true, meaning that he comprehended into the sword. The person opposite him could control 10,000 laws and 3,000 Taos. However, Zhongsho's sword was the same as the Tao itself. The spear and sword clanged as Zhongsho retreated once more. In this world river, he was like a kite with a broken string. A mouthful of fresh blood seeped out from his mouth. However, the spear that pierced through was also reflected back. Laughing involuntarily, Zhongsho mocked himself. As expected, the Tao true meaning that he comprehended was still really weak. He was defeated by this cousin who he didn't know if he was dead or alive. The young man snorted coldly, but there was a hint of graveness in his eyes. His body flashed as he teleported within the 10 extreme Imperial Tao Destruction sword formation. Then, another spear followed closely behind, attacking straight at him. Zhongsho's pupils constricted once more. This spear actually controlled a portion of the strength of the 10 extreme Imperial Tao Destruction sword formation. The strength of the sword formation was being used by him. It was also the initial spirit, realm, defensive, spear intent. This person's martial path was really terrifying. He didn't dare to hesitate at all as Zhongsho stabbed out once more. 1. Origin, Sword Universe. Space shattered. The surrounding void instantly shattered into thousands of worlds. Numerous space cracks were formed, twisting and stretching. It caused Zhongsho's body to be close to the tip of the spear, suddenly far away. Sometimes he was just inches away. Sometimes he was millions of feet away. This is a space technique? How complicated? The teen scoffed, and the spear shook. The entire shattered void was forcefully locked down. Under the restriction of the sword formation, Zhongsho managed to dodge it. Although it was complicated, it was deep and profound. However, he didn't give up. The spear's shadow changed once more, like thousands of pear blossoms floating down. It was extremely beautiful and eye-catching, causing one to be dazzled. However, it brought with it a vast aura that could shatter everything. Thousand Flame Destruction. Your talents are outstanding, as expected from the only bloodline of Fourth Ant. You actually want to go from complex to simple, using the Tao as your foundation. Unfortunately, the heavens don't lie. That day you kill my today I will end your life. Thousands of pear blossoms lit up white flames, causing the entire void to burn. The teen's voice was mixed within, sounding really vicious. I want to see how many more spears you can block today. Zhongsho's face was ashen white. He didn't dare to smile as he looked at the sky full of pear blossoms. His eyes were focused, and then the thousands of spear shadows disappeared in his field of vision. From thousands to thousands, from thousands to hundreds. Hundreds of spear shadows. In the end, only 3 were left. Although there were thousands of pear blossoms, what he really needed to block were only these 3 spears. As for the heaven-burning flame, it made one feel terrified. So hot, he felt like his entire body was about to burn up. His true chi and soul were boiling and hard to control. If not for these few months, using the Imperial Tao Dragon 2 sword to train his true chi control, to break the 3-7 cycle Xiantong full restrictions, he would have died. However, these white flames would have caused him to burn to death. 1. Origin. The sword light rose up. The 50,000 feet lightning wings behind him suddenly shrunk, turning into a black flame dragon that coiled around the nameless sword. It shone in the air. Coincidentally, there were 3 swords. They struck the heavy spear shadows, causing the thousands of pear blossoms to be unable to fall down. The lightning blaze, thousand flash clashed with the white flames in the sky, giving out a series of exploding sounds. Zhongsho's body lost control once more as he fell down. He was struck by this giant power and nearly fell into the space fissure. However, within 100 feet, it was still his unbreakable sword domain. Chapter 853. Tens of thousands of pear blossoms could only return 100 feet in front of Zhongsho. It was like a heavy and strong boulder. No matter how the waves hit it, it wouldn't budge at all. The shockwave continued until the void was completely shattered. Only then did the young man let out another cold snort. Dust annihilation. The spear's shadow instantly changed. The silver-white pear blossoms in the sky retracted. Tens of thousands of silver-white shadows formed into a line and shot forwards. It was still strong and overbearing, like it was indestructible. Under the spear's shadow, everything would be turned to dust. Zhongsho's pupils constricted as he looked carefully. He saw the spear's shadow split into 10, 10 into 100, 100 into 1,000, and then into 10,000. It was just a spear stabbing over, but there seemed to be tens of thousands of possibilities. Taking in a deep breath, Zhongshou gathered up all his strength. 24 Imperial Dao Destruction Dragon Tooth swords circled around his body, causing tens of thousands of sword waves. Then it also condensed into a single point, and a sword slashed through the air. When there was a loud kung, a sharp sound that nearly broke one's eardrums shook the void. Zhongshou felt his sword energy collapse bit by bit. The sword's shadow dissipated once more. The 24 Dragon Tooth swords were the first to scatter. Then the nameless sword in his hand was also sent flying by the huge power. The web between his thumb and index finger tore. His skin split open and fresh blood spurted out like a fountain. His entire body instantly turned into a blood man. How strong! Zhongshou felt like his meridians were about to be smashed by the spear energy that charged in. He was not the only one who was using the black and white hole technique to borrow strength. The person opposite him was doing the same. When using Imperial Dao strength, he was much weaker than him. However, after these 100 strikes, his spear was 3 to 5 times stronger than at the start. The Dao-seeking technique he chose was actually seen through so easily by this person. This spear was directly aimed at his Dao foundations. Zhongshou smiled bitterly. Luckily, his black and white Dharma was still hidden in his soul ocean void space. The 18-word true talismans and the dozens of star Dao seeds were even more complicated. Before simplifying the complex, these were his true foundations. However, if this continued, they would only lose and not win. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind, but he still could not find the slightest chance of victory. Zhongshou could not help but shake his head and sigh. As expected, he was still not a match for this person. His current strength was far from being able to surpass the first level to fight against such a talented person. He was really helpless and unwilling. The difference of one level was like the difference between heaven and earth. If they were at the same level, they might be able to put up a fight. In order to defeat this person, he had to break through to the spirit realm. As this thought flashed through his mind, Zhongshou already had the intention to retreat. The spear and sword of the two clashed several times in the world river void. Coincidentally, another spear pierced out the body of the spear, trembling. It caused the last 10 extreme Imperial Dao Dragon Tooth sword around him to scatter. As for the young man, his expression became even more malevolent. Zhongshou, you killed Z that day and let her die happily. Seeing that you are fourth aunt son and also a member of my Liu family, I won't use that heart-gouging and bone-scraping method to torture you. I will only let you, Zhongshou, be buried with her today. The moment he said this, millions of pear blossoms appeared. Numerous spear shadows landed down. It brought with it a cruel and intense energy as it pierced through where Zhongshou was standing, leaving no space at all. Zhongshou stood in the void and didn't resist. At this moment, his nameless sword was out of the way. Apart from a few protector beasts who hadn't appeared, he actually had no way to resist. However, he was really calm, like he didn't care about life and death. He spread out his spiritual sense and connected with those star dragon pellets. Is that so? However, you are speaking a little too early. Today I, Zhongshou, have lost. I am totally convinced. Since he couldn't win, then it was time for him to leave. Since he relied on the power of the Book of Ian to be reborn in this era, this was the first time he was forced to such a state where he could only flee for his life. Before his words landed, his entire body was pierced and torn apart by those millions of spear shadows. However, moments later, the spear-wielding teen wasn't happy, but furious instead. He hollered in rage as the spear's shadow gathered in the void like he was venting the rage in his chest. In front of him, there was no corpse or broken limbs of Zhongshou, nor was there any spiritual energy from his soul. At the last moment, Zhongshou actually escaped from a spear. A moment later, the world river calmed down once more. A look of confusion appeared on the teen's face. When they clashed just now, he didn't know how this kid used the void movement technique. With just a flash, he was nowhere to be seen. He only knew that it was a space teleportation technique and also had the aura of an instant space dragon. However, it was so sudden that there wasn't the slightest sign of it happening beforehand. He really didn't know how this person did it. Frowning slightly, the spear-wielding teen's eyes were sharp as he swept around. His entire body was burning with pale white flames, and his face was flushed red. This was the sign of his bloodline being activated to the extreme. He really didn't know the foundations of this void movement technique. However, since this person's spiritual sense and aura were locked by him, then he definitely wouldn't be able to escape from his spear. As long as he was within 40 worlds, he wouldn't be able to escape from his senses, the calling and resonance of the sky-burning bloodline. In just a moment, the spear-wielding teen looked to the side of the void. His gaze shone into the void as he looked in a certain direction. Then, he coldly sneered and unhurriedly walked in that direction. He had found him. At this moment, hundreds of celestial realm speeds away, Zhongsho was consuming a pill. Along with the medicinal effects seeping in and recovering his body and meridians, some color finally returned to Zhongsho's face. However, just as his injuries recovered by 20%, he felt that violent aura chase over once more. He couldn't help but frown. Without hesitation, his body flashed once more. He was at another place where the star dragon pellet appeared. Then, he casually reached out and grabbed the nameless sword in his hand once more. He casually waved, and a bright sword shadow appeared. A simple sword, but it was filled with Tao attainments. The Tao was simple. As expected, Long Ying's master's sword path isn't merger, but one. Who knew that I, Zhongsho, nearly walked the wrong path? One origin sword, merger Tao. It isn't stacking or merging into one word. It is my foundation, the Tao word. A bright glow flashed in Zhongsho's eyes, and then he laughed. Although the battle just now was a calamity, it wasn't without benefits. A few months ago, he used the Book of Ian to speed things up for a few years, but he still couldn't comprehend them. At this moment after this battle, it was actually solved. Imagining it wasn't any weaker than personally witnessing it. 1,000 years of meditation wasn't as good as an epiphany. At this moment, if he had enough time, Zhongsho would be able to merge more than 4 instant space dragon pellets within a month. In just a year, he would be able to step into the celestial realm. Since that is the case, then let this person be the grinding stone for me, Zhongsho. Chapter 854. At this moment, if he had enough time, Zhongsho would be able to merge with 4 more instant space dragon pellets within a month. In just a year, he would be able to step into celestial realm. He didn't even need the Book of Ian to speed up. Since that is the case, then let this person be the grinding stone for me, Zhongsho. After the defeat, Zhongsho's fighting spirit didn't decrease at all. Instead, it was even more pumped up. He didn't see it as a tough situation. Instead, it was a rare training for him. Only under strong pressure would the potential in his body explode out. They all said that experts were lonely. Zhongsho didn't feel anything about that. With his current cultivation, he was far from being invincible. However, during these few years, he had always been successful. Even top talents like Osamu Hara and Juyu weren't able to beat him. Within the same grade, he pretty much couldn't find a suitable opponent. Apart from the battle with the Taoist faction, he pretty much didn't go through any true difficulties. It was like that person just now was the best grinding stone for him. He could test his Tao heart, verify his sword technique, and sharpen his will. Zhongsho's mind moved, causing the star dragon pellet that he used before to shift slightly. He also went all out to activate the 7-cycle Xiantong, full restriction to suppress the bloodline movement. Vital energy surged in his body, dispersing the medicinal power that seeped in and spreading it to his limbs and bones. Just at that moment, in front of Zhongsho's brow, another silver-white spear suddenly struck, pretty much inches away. The voice of the spear-wielding teen rang out once more. Where you try to escape to? After a period of turbulence, the void returned to silence once more. Zhongsho's body had already disappeared once more. The spear-wielding teen also didn't appear. He wasn't willing to stop and waste any time, continuing to chase Zhongsho's tracks. His movement speed was also extremely quick. Although he wasn't as fast as Zhongsho, using the instant space dragon pellet to directly teleport. However, they were often able to find it in a few moments. This caused Zhongsho to be unable to regulate his breathing in peace. He could not even stop for a breath's time before he had to change his position. Controlling time and space, controlling all light and thunder. After several changes, Zhongsho's heart sank. This person's martial path, no matter what kind of things or spells, he could control them all. His speed was so fast that he had never seen it before. Although he wasn't afraid of running out of energy if this continued, it wasn't a solution. How could he have the time to recuperate and comprehend what he had gained from this battle? Right now, what he needed the most was time, but this person was unwilling to give it to him. Not holding back at all. Isn't that too unbridled? If he wanted peace, he couldn't let this person have no scruples. Zhongsho's eyes narrowed slightly, and there seemed to be lightning flashing in his eyes. In the battle, just now, he had still hidden many trump cards, but he had no choice but to use them now. He also wanted to see the true strength of that person and how he would deal with it. With a flash, he appeared in another part of the void. This was the furthest his instant space dragon pellet could reach. The moment he appeared, the 10 extreme Imperial Dao Destruction sword formation was spread out once more. The 40-star Dao seeds in the distance also passed through some invisible threads. Various kinds of spiritual energy were injected over 40 types of interconnected but totally different laws pretty much merged into one with the sword formation. In that instant, Zhongsho gathered up all the strength in his body. Light flashed as he slashed out once more. One origin sword universe light. This sword directly pierced through the void at a speed of 300 breaths. The bloodline resonance was not the only one who could clearly sense his location. Zhongsho was the same. He could also know where that person was. The sword light slashed out, like the space nearby was forcefully ripped open. The sword was extremely quick, causing time to nearly stop. 40 stars, 24 Imperial Dao Dragon Tooth swords merged into one and gathered in this sword. The person followed the sword and sped through the void. It brought with it a bright and sharp light in just a 3,000th of a second. The nameless sword was already in front of the spear-wielding teen. Exchanging glances, Zhongsho could clearly see the shock in this person's eyes. He didn't expect that under such circumstances, Zhongsho actually had the strength to fight back. Spear shadows rose up like a heaven-covering wave and also like a firm wall. However, this sword still forcefully broke in. Then, the two of them crossed one another. In the next moment, Zhongsho's body disappeared from this space once more. The spear-wielding teen frowned and stood still in the void. This time he didn't continue to chase, his hand touching his neck. His originally perfectly fine skin instantly exploded out a ball of snow mist. A 3-inch-long wound appeared on the side of his neck and shoulder. If he hadn't dodged in time, he wouldn't have been able to block it. This sword should have sliced off his head. He pressed down once more, forcing it from the inside out. Suddenly, an incomparably sharp sword chi was forced out. Even after a few breaths, the remaining sword energy had already been worn down by the true chi in his body. However, when it erupted, it still caused the originally stable void structure in the vicinity to become unstable and almost shatter. The teen looked at the fresh blood on his hand. His eyes were dark as he clenched his fist. Remember this. Zhongsho, today, I, Lu Wushuang, swear on my blood. Even if I go to heaven or hell, even if I kill gods and saints, even if my soul falls forever, I will make you fall under this spear. His voice was dark and cold, like it came from the depths of hell. The voice spread out for 10,000 miles, ringing out in the void of the world river for a long time. Zhongsho's brow furrowed when he heard this from afar. So this person was called Lu Wushuang? This person's martial path spear technique was indeed unparalleled. Then he shook his head. It was best if he didn't have such thoughts. The most important thing now was to heal up his injuries. That strike just now nearly sliced off Lu Wushuang's head. However, his injuries weren't light. His arms and legs were brushed by the spear shadow. It took away large chunks of flesh and blood. One could see the white bones. Unfortunately, such a price, and in the end, it was all for nothing. Under such circumstances, this person still had the strength to fight back. As expected, he was much harder to deal with than he had imagined. At this moment, he had already lost the best chance. If he missed this chance, Lu Wushuang would definitely be more wary and wary. He wouldn't be able to go all out like just now. The same method would definitely be useless. Using his spiritual sense to sense, he only felt that the aura in the distance was still chasing over. However, his speed had decreased by a full 20% compared to before. Zhongshou instantly laughed and continued to teleport. If he couldn't win, then he could only run. This battle with this person would definitely last for a long time. Within a year and a half, it would be tough to end with a bloodline entanglement, unless Lu Wushuang retreated on his own accord. If not, only one of them could survive. It has already been a day. Why isn't Brother Shou back? Beside the pavilion, Sherulin leaned on the railing, her brows furrowed as she looked into the distance at the void. Actually, she couldn't see much, but her eyes were still filled with anticipation. Although she didn't directly participate in the Battle of the Yuanren world a few days ago. However, in the outer region, it was even more dangerous. Only 6 spaceships needed to go against 30 ships from Jidu Xianding and Tianfang Guild. The pressure wasn't small. They had an intense battle in the outer region world river, using that complicated spiritual river branch. In that battle, not only did they wipe out 2 ships, but they also captured a complete spaceship. This caused the enemy to not dare to fight recklessly. They also kept the 30 ships outside of the void, unable to enter the Yuanren world. He thought that after he returned, he would definitely be rewarded by Zhongshou. However, after he returned, there was no sign of Zhongshou for an entire day. Suddenly, a sense of worry arose in his heart. But what had happened? Beside her was Ruoshui. She had just returned from the East Ocean and wasn't as lazy as before. Her expression was solemn as she entered deep thought. A moment later, she shook her head. He might have faced some problems, but Ruler should be able to deal with it. During these few months, Zhongshou was pretty much in secluded meditation. At every moment, he was crafting flying swords. He was opening up the outer region, but at the most crucial moment, he didn't bother about anything. After some rough planning, he returned to his room. A year ago, Long Ying stepped into End Realm and could cover everything. Zhongshou didn't hide the Book of Ian matter from them anymore. She and Ruolin could head to Zhongshou's room at any moment to use the time acceleration of the Book of Ian to cultivate. Each time he headed over, he saw that Zhongshou was fully focused. He was either refining dragon pellets or crafting Imperial Dao Dragon 2 swords. He didn't stop for a moment. It was as if something was urging him to do something. Since there was a calamity, he should have predicted it and was preparing for it during these few months. Most probably, he had enough confidence to be able to deal with it. If not, he definitely wouldn't have left a few words before he left. Just as this sounded out, Ruoshui saw a golden light fall from above. It landed right in the direction of the main hall in Yuanjing Palace. Decree, Ruoshui was stunned, exchanging glances with Shi Ruolin. Then their bodies flashed and they flew in that direction. After the battle, Yuanjing Palace was still really cold. This time, the Sword faction and Buddhist faction cultivators were all outside. The 300,000 troops were also split up in various places. At this moment, in Yuanjing Palace, there were only the family members sent over by the various nobles and nobles. However, they were all in seclusion and didn't know that the situation had already been settled, so they didn't dare to come out easily. Next would be the newly recruited disciples of the various sections. However, they were all really well behaved. As a result, there were no traces of people along the way. The huge Yuanjing Palace didn't have any joy of victory. When the two of them entered the main hall, they noticed that someone was a step ahead of them. Zifang, who had been in charge of Yuanjing Palace, had already arrived here. He stood quietly beside a talisman decree deep in thought. When Ruoxue saw that, she directly asked, "Is there news from ruler?" "What did he say?" Zifong turned around and shook his head. "There is a seal within this talisman. According to the monarch's will, it can only be opened after all of us have gathered." That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.